Every Elden Ring ending explained to fall asleep. To this video breaks down every ending in Elden Ring, because the game gives you 6 wildly different ways to reshape the world, and most players only see 1 or 2 of them before moving on to something else. I put this together after realizing that understanding these endings means understanding the entire game's cosmology and the motivations of every major faction you encounter. I chose to organize this by starting with the default ending and then moving through each alternative in order of how drastically they reject the existing order. Some endings required me to dig through dozens of item descriptions and NPC questlines to piece together what's actually happening, so I've included that context here. What I left out were the minor variations that don't change the fundamental outcome, and some of the more speculative fan theories that don't have strong textual support. Before I move forward, I'm counting on you to support my channel by clicking that tiny subscribe button so that we can spread these amazing videos to folks like you around the world. Thank you. Age of Fracture. The Age of Fracture is what happens when you do exactly what the game tells you to do and nothing more. You beat the Elden Beast, you touch the fractured remnants of the Elden Ring, and you become Elden Lord, Marika's consort, the one who will rule the lands between in a new age. But here's the thing that the game doesn't spell out for you. This ending doesn't fix anything. The name itself tells you everything. Age of Fracture. The ring is still broken. The world is still broken. You've just become the person in charge of a broken world. To understand why this matters, you need to understand what the Elden Ring actually is. It's not just a piece of jewelry, it's the underlying code of reality in the lands between. It's a collection of runes that define how the world works. Birth, death, causality, order itself. When Marika shattered the Elden Ring, she broke the fundamental laws that governed existence. The shattering wasn't just a political crisis, it was a metaphysical catastrophe. The Golden Order, which is the system of rules that the Greater Will imposed on the world through Marika, depended on the Elden Ring being intact. With it shattered, the laws stopped working properly. Death stopped functioning correctly, which is why you see walking corpses and undead everywhere. The Erd Tree stopped giving out grace to people, which meant no more reincarnation through its roots. Demigods went insane fighting over the Great Runes, which are the shards of the Elden Ring, because holding those shards gave them power, but also corrupted them. When you become Elden Lord in the Age of Fracture ending, you're stepping into Marika's role. But the game suggests that you're not actually fixing the underlying problem. Melina's narration describes you mending the ring and ushering in an age where life flourishes and souls are once again delivered to the Erd Tree. But the visuals tell a different story. The Erd Tree is still burning. The ring is still in pieces. What you've done is essentially reboot the Golden Order without addressing any of the fundamental issues that caused Marika to shatter it in the first place. Marika's motivations for shattering the ring are intentionally left vague by the game, but item descriptions and environmental storytelling point toward a few possibilities. The Golden Order demanded perfection and rejected anything that didn't fit its narrow definition of life. The Omens, who were born with horns and considered cursed, had their horns cut off and were thrown into sewers. Those who live in death were persecuted and hunted. The misbegotten were enslaved. Marika herself was a Numen, part of a race that came from outside the lands between, and she saw her own people destroyed or assimilated by the very order she was forced to uphold. One reading of Marika's character, supported by dialogue from Melina, where she quotes Marika's own words, suggests that Marika came to doubt the Greater Will. She says that she's going to betray the Greater Will and that her children should struggle and grow strong through adversity. The shattering might have been her attempt to break free from a system that she realized was fundamentally unjust. By becoming Elden Lord and restoring that system, you're arguably betraying Marika's actual intentions. The Age of Fracture ending also doesn't address what happened to the other outer gods. The Greater Will is just one of several cosmic entities that want to control the lands between. The Formless Mother who grants power through blood, the God of Rot who infected Melina, the Frenzied Flame which wants to burn everything. These forces are still out there, still trying to influence the world. By simply restoring the Golden Order, you're not protecting against them. You're just reasserting one outer god's dominance over the others. The ending cutscene shows you sitting on a throne with Marika's body dissolving into golden light. And then you see the Erd tree restored, but still burning with a strange fire. This image suggests incompleteness. The tree should be golden and radiant if the order was truly restored, but instead it's consumed by flame, which in Elden Ring's symbolic language represents both purification and destruction. You've become Elden Lord, but you're ruling over ashes and attempting to enforce an order that already failed once. What makes this ending particularly interesting from a lore perspective is that it's the path of least resistance. You don't have to complete any special quest lines. You don't have to make any choices that the game presents as morally significant. You just fight your way through the main bosses and claim your prize. The game is suggesting that taking power and restoring the status quo is the easy choice, even if it's not the right one. Age of Stars, Ranni's ending is probably the most popular alternative ending, and it's the one that requires the most work from the player. You have to complete her entire questline, which involves helping her retrieve a cursed knife, fighting a shadow beast that was sent to kill her, exploring the underground cities, defeating one of the hardest bosses in the game, and finally giving her a ring in a moment that the game frames as a marriage proposal. In return, she offers you a way to fundamentally change what the Elden Ring represents. Ranni is one of the most complex characters in the game, and understanding her ending requires understanding her history. She's the daughter of Radagon and Rennala, which makes her a demigod, but she rejected that identity. On the Night of Black Knives, when Godwyn the Golden was assassinated, Ranni orchestrated her own death as well. She had the Black Knife assassins kill her physical body while simultaneously killing Godwyn's soul. This created a paradox. Godwyn's body lived on without a soul, becoming the source of the death blight that spreads through the lands between. Ranni's soul lived on without a body, allowing her to exist as a spirit inhabiting a doll. Why would she do this? Because she wanted to escape the control of the Two Fingers and the Greater Will. As an Empyrean, which is a being chosen to potentially become a vessel for an outer god, Ranni was destined to serve the Greater Will just like Marika did. By killing her body, she severed that connection. She gave up her great rune, her divine flesh, everything that tied her to the Golden Order, but she kept her soul and her ability to think and plan and act. Her plan all along was to replace the Golden Order with something different. Not another system of divine control, but an order of night and cold and stars that would be distant from the lives of people. She describes it as an order not of gold, but of the stars and moon, a 1,000-year voyage into the dark. When you help her complete her quest, and she summons the Dark Moon, what she's doing is calling upon the power of the moon to reshape the Elden Ring according to principles that have nothing to do with the Greater Will. The ending cutscene shows the Erd tree gone, replaced by a massive dark moon hanging in the sky. Ranni appears and talks about ushering in an age of stars, where the order will be kept far away so that people can live and die without the interference of gods. This is fundamentally different from the Age of Fracture. Instead of restoring divine order, Ranni is removing it. She's creating a world where people have free will because the gods are literally too far away to meddle in their lives. But there's ambiguity here, and the game intentionally leaves it open to interpretation. Ranni's dialogue can be read in different ways depending on the translation. In the English version, she talks about an order of the stars that will be distant and unknowable. In the Japanese version, the language suggests a journey into fear and doubt, 1,000 years of cold and darkness. Some players read this as liberation, others read it as abandonment. Is Ranni freeing humanity from the tyranny of the gods, or is she leaving them to fend for themselves in a hostile universe? There's also the question of what happens to death in Ranni's order. The Golden Order controlled death through the Rune of Death, which Marika removed from the Elden Ring and gave to Maliketh to guard. This allowed Marika to create a world where her chosen people couldn't truly die. They would return to the Erd Tree and be reborn. But it also meant that death became a tool of control. The undead who weren't part of the Erd Tree's cycle were considered abominations. Ranni's order points toward a natural cycle of death and rebirth that's not controlled by any god, but the game doesn't explicitly confirm this. What's clear is that Ranni despises the Golden Order and everything it represents. She calls the Two Fingers liars. She talks about the Greater Will as if it's a parasite that has attached itself to the world. Her ending is an act of cosmic rebellion. By becoming her consort, you're helping her pull off the greatest heist in the game's cosmology. You're stealing the Elden Ring from the god that created it and using it to impose a completely different set of rules. The marriage aspect is interesting too. In the Age of Fracture ending, you become Marika's consort by default, stepping into Godfrey's old role. But with Ranni, you choose to become her consort. She offers you the choice explicitly. She even tells you that the path ahead will be cold and dark and lonely. This is important because it means your character is making an informed decision to reject the obvious path to power in favor of something uncertain and possibly terrifying. Some item descriptions and dialogue suggest that Ranni learned about the Dark Moon and the power of the stars from her mother, Rennala, who was the head of the Academy of Raya Lucaria before she went insane from grief. The Academy studied glintstone sorcery, which is derived from the primeval current, an ancient form of magic that existed before the Golden Order. Ranni's ending could be seen as a return to these older forms of power that the Greater Will suppressed when it took control of the lands between. There's also a connection between Ranni's ending and the eternal cities of Nokron and Nokstella, which are buried underground. These cities were punished by the Greater Will for creating a false night sky and attempting to challenge the Golden Order. They worship the moon and stars, just like Ranni does. By achieving her ending, you're vindicating the eternal cities and their rebellion. You're proving that it was possible to overthrow the order that destroyed them. Blessing of Despair. The Dung Eater's ending is the darkest and most disturbing ending in the game, and it requires you to help one of the most repulsive characters in any From Software game achieve his twisted goal. The Dung Eater is a serial killer who defiles corpses in a specific way that curses their souls, not just killing them, but ensuring that they and their children and their children's children will all be born as omens, covered in horns, and rejected by the Golden Order. His goal is to spread this curse to everyone in the lands between, so that all life becomes cursed. To get this ending, you have to find the Dung Eater in the Round Table Hold, then track down his real body in the sewers beneath Leyndell. You have to feed him seedbed curses, which are items you find on corpses that he's defiled throughout the world. Each one is described in absolutely horrific terms. After you give him enough curses, he gives you the mending rune of the Fell Curse, which you can use to alter the Elden Ring when you repair it. The resulting ending shows the Erd Tree covered in a reddish corruption, and the world is remade according to the Dung Eater's vision. Every living thing will now be born cursed. The description of the mending rune says that it will spread the curse to every being, ensuring that all life will be touched by the pox. This isn't just an ending where evil wins. It's an ending where suffering becomes the fundamental law of existence. But here's where it gets philosophically interesting. The Dung Eater believes he's doing something righteous. From his perspective, the Golden Order is built on exclusion and discrimination. Omens are cast out. The dead who don't fit into the Erd Tree's cycle are hunted, and anyone who doesn't meet the Order's standards is rejected. His solution is to make everyone equally cursed so that there can be no hierarchy of blessed and damned. If everyone is an omen, then no one is special. It's a twisted form of egalitarianism. The game gives you hints about why the Dung Eater is the way he is through item descriptions and environmental details. Omens in the Golden Order are treated as abominations. Their horns are cut off at birth in excruciating cleansing rituals. Those who survive are thrown into sewers or imprisoned. Morgott, one of the demigod bosses, is an omen who was imprisoned beneath Leyndell his entire childhood, despite being the son of Marika herself. The Dung Eater's obsession with spreading the omen curse could be read as a revenge fantasy against a society that treated cursed beings like him as less than human. There's also a connection to the concept of the Crucible, which was the primordial form of the Erd Tree before the Golden Order refined and sanitized it. The Crucible was chaotic and produced all kinds of strange life forms. Omens, misbegotten, beings with extra limbs or horns or wings. The Golden Order suppressed the Crucible and declared that only certain types of life were acceptable. The Dung Eater's curse could be seen as an attempt to return the world to a pre-Golden Order state, where the chaotic diversity of the Crucible was the norm. But the game doesn't let you off the hook morally by giving the Dung Eater sympathetic motivations. His methods are explicitly shown to be cruel and sadistic. He doesn't just curse people, he defiles them in ways that are described as worse than death. He laughs about the suffering he causes. Even if you agree that the Golden Order is unjust, using the Dung Eater's rune means endorsing his specific brand of horror. The ending cutscene is visually nauseating. The Erd tree looks diseased, covered in a crimson rot that spreads like a plague. Melina's narration describes a curse that will spread to all life, ensuring that everyone will be born with the pox. The implication is that you've created a world where suffering is universal and inescapable. Children will be born cursed. Their children will be cursed. There will be no escape from the omen's fate. What makes this ending particularly grim is that it's permanent. The other endings suggest cycles that could potentially be broken. The Age of Fracture could lead to another shattering. Ranni's order could be overthrown by another outer god. But the Blessing of Despair rewrites the Elden Ring itself to make the curse part of the fundamental nature of life. It's not a system that can be reformed. It's a biological and spiritual certainty. Some players have pointed out that this ending might be the most honest one. The other endings promise change but might just be different flavors of oppression. The Age of Stars sounds like freedom, but could be abandonment. The Age of Fracture restores a system that already failed, but the Blessing of Despair doesn't make any false promises. It tells you exactly what it is. Universal suffering. No hierarchy, no pretense of justice. Just everyone drowning in the same curse. There's also an interesting parallel between the Dung Eater and Marika. Both of them want to destroy the existing order, but their methods and goals are completely opposite. Marika shattered the ring to create chaos and force her children to struggle and evolve. The Dung Eater wants to use the ring to impose his own vision of equality through shared damnation. Both are acts of cosmic rebellion, but one comes from a place of hope for something better, and the other comes from a desire to drag everyone down to the same level of misery. Age of Order. Goldmask's ending is the most intellectually rigorous ending in the game, and it requires you to help a character who never speaks a single word complete his theological research into the flaws of the Golden Order. Goldmask is a scholar who has devoted his entire life to studying the Golden Order and perfecting it. He stands in various locations throughout the game, pointing at things, and it's up to you and his disciple, Brother Corhin, to figure out what he's trying to communicate. The questline involves discovering the secret that Radagon and Marika are the same person, which shatters Corhin's faith but deepens Goldmask's understanding. Radagon is Marika's other half, her male aspect. When she shattered the Elden Ring, Radagon tried to repair it because he was loyal to the Golden Order in a way that Marika wasn't. This duality, this internal conflict within the god who was supposed to be perfect and unchanging, is what Goldmask identifies as the fundamental flaw in the Golden Order. The problem, as Goldmask sees it, is that the Golden Order was built on the idea that the gods were perfect and unchanging. But if Marika herself was divided, if she could doubt and change and rebel, then the gods were never perfect to begin with. The entire system was built on a lie. The solution Goldmask proposes is to remove the gods from the equation entirely, create a perfect order that runs itself without the need for fallible divine beings to maintain it. To achieve this ending, you need to help Goldmask develop the mending rune of perfect order, which you can use when repairing the Elden Ring. The description says that it removes the fickleness of the gods, creating an order that is absolute and unchallengeable. The ending cutscene shows the Erd tree glowing with golden light, more radiant than in any other ending. The world is restored to a perfected version of the Golden Order, where the gods no longer have the power to shatter it on a whim. But here's the question the game leaves open. Is this actually better? An order without the possibility of change is an order without growth. It's static and eternal, which sounds good if you think the current system is already perfect, but it also means there's no room for reform. If the perfected Golden Order still discriminates against omens, still persecutes those who live in death, still enforces the same hierarchies and exclusions that made Marika rebel in the first place, then Goldmask has just made those injustices permanent and unchangeable. The Age of Order could be read as a conservative ending. It's about fixing the existing system rather than replacing it. Goldmask doesn't question whether the Golden Order should exist. He questions whether it's being implemented correctly. His solution is to make the order more rigid, more absolute, more resistant to the kind of rebellion that Marika attempted. From one perspective, this prevents future shatterings and creates stability. From another perspective, it locks the world into whatever flaws the Golden Order had and removes the possibility of evolution. There's also something unsettling about the idea of removing the god's agency. Marika may have been flawed, but she was capable of doubt and change. The perfected order that Gold Mask creates doesn't have that capacity. It's a machine that runs without consciousness or will. This connects to themes throughout the game about free will and determinism. Is a perfect order that can't be changed really an improvement over an imperfect order that allows for the possibility of growth? The questline itself is fascinating because it involves watching Gold Mask's faith evolve. When you first meet him, he's a devout follower of the Golden Order who believes it's already perfect. When he learns about Radagon and Marika's duality, he doesn't lose faith like Corhin does. Instead, his faith deepens because he now understands the problem more clearly. He's not a blind zealot. He's a scholar who adjusts his theories based on new evidence. The ending he creates is the result of genuine intellectual work, not just religious dogma. Brother Corhin's reaction to Goldmask's discoveries is equally important. Corhin starts as a teacher of Golden Order incantations, completely devoted to the orthodoxy. When he learns the truth about the gods, he breaks. He can't handle the cognitive dissonance. He either goes mad or dies depending on how you complete the quest. This shows the danger of building your entire worldview on the assumption that authority figures are infallible. When that assumption is shattered, some people can adapt like Goldmask, but others collapse like Corhin. The mending rune of perfect order is described as the product of Goldmask's unyielding, superhuman dedication. He didn't just think about the problem, he meditated on it so intensely that he developed a fundamental understanding of the mathematical and theological principles underlying reality. The rune he creates is essentially a patch for the Elden Ring's code that removes the variables that allowed for Marika's rebellion. It's an elegant solution from a technical standpoint, but it raises ethical questions about whether free will is a bug or a feature. Some players interpret this ending as the true good ending because it restores order without the chaos of the fracture or the darkness of Rani's stars or the horror of the Dung Eater's curse. The world returns to stability and prosperity under the Golden Order, but now the gods can't screw it up again. But other players see it as a cautionary tale about the dangers of seeking perfection. A perfect system is a system that can't learn from its mistakes because it's been designed to believe it doesn't make any. Lord of Frenzied Flame. The Frenzied Flame ending is the only ending that locks you out of all other endings unless you complete a specific difficult quest to undo it. And it's the ending where you destroy everything. Not reform it, not change it, just burn it all down until nothing exists except chaos and flame. This is the ending you get if you embrace the Frenzied Flame, which is an outer god that represents madness and the desire to return everything to the primordial state of oneness that existed before the greater will imposed order on the universe. To get this ending, you have to travel deep beneath Leyndell into the subterranean shunning grounds, past the Cathedral of the Forsaken, and find the Three Fingers. This is one of the creepiest moments in the game. The Three Fingers are the counterpart to the Two Fingers that serve the greater will. Where the Two Fingers try to guide you toward becoming Elden Lord and restoring order, the Three Fingers want you to burn the world. When you meet them, they grab your character and brand you with the Frenzied Flame, marking you as the Lord of Chaos. The lore behind the Frenzied Flame is scattered throughout item descriptions and environmental storytelling. It points toward a tragedy in the ancient past. There was a group of merchants who were persecuted by the Golden Order and buried alive beneath Leyndell. In their despair and agony, they called out to any god that would listen, and the Frenzied Flame answered. It gave them the power of madness, the ability to burn the world that had rejected them. The flame spread through their corpses, which are still down there in the depths, playing instruments and singing songs of chaos. The Frenzied Flame's philosophy, if you can call it that, is based on the idea that distinction and separation are the source of all suffering. In the beginning, everything was one. The greater will imposed order on the chaos, creating boundaries and categories and individuals. Life and death, light and dark, blessed and cursed. that these distinctions created conflict and suffering. The Frenzied Flame wants to undo the separation and return everything to the original state of undifferentiated oneness, not by creating unity, but by destroying everything until there's nothing left to be separate. When you become the Lord of Frenzied Flame, you're not just choosing a different political system for the lands between, you're choosing to end existence itself. The ending cutscene shows your character's head engulfed in flame, their eyes burning with yellow madness. You set the Erd Tree on fire, but not like the fire you used to burn your way in during the normal ending. This fire spreads across the entire world. The sky turns red. Everything burns. Melina, if she's still alive, shows up to swear vengeance on you because you've destroyed everything she was trying to protect. The most important line in this ending comes from the three fingers when they mark you. They say that all that exists is birth, suffering, and death, and they offer to burn it all away so that no one will have to suffer ever again. This is a nihilistic philosophy taken to its logical extreme. If life involves suffering, and if there's no way to eliminate suffering without eliminating the conditions that make life possible, then the only truly compassionate act is to end existence. But the game challenges this philosophy through the character of Hieta, who can guide you toward the Frenzied Flame if you complete her quest. Hieta is blind and eats grapes that are actually human eyeballs that you feed her. As she eats more eyes, she starts to see visions of the Frenzied Flame's truth. By the end of her quest, she's completely converted to its philosophy. She stands before the door to the three fingers and talks about how the greater will made a mistake when it created life. She says that all things can be conjoined, which sounds like unity, but actually means the annihilation of individuality. The tragedy of Hieta's quest is that she's wrong, but she's been driven mad by suffering to the point where she can't see any other solution. She was probably one of the finger maidens who served the two fingers, but something happened to her that broke her faith. Now she's latched onto the Frenzied Flame because it offers a definitive answer to the problem of suffering. No more ambiguity. No more struggling to find meaning in a broken world. Just burn it all and end the question. There's a parallel between the Frenzied Flame ending and what Marika did when she shattered the Elden Ring, but taken much further. Marika broke the system because she saw its flaws. The Lord of Frenzied Flame breaks reality itself because they've concluded that any system will inevitably be flawed. It's the ultimate form of despair, not the despair of the dung-eater who wants everyone to suffer equally, but the despair of someone who thinks suffering is so fundamental to existence that the only escape is non-existence. The game gives you a way to undo the Frenzied Flame if you find Miquella's needle, which is one of the most obscure items in the game, hidden behind one of the hardest boss fights. If you use the needle before the final boss, you can remove the flame's mark and choose a different ending. This suggests that even the Frenzied Flame's claim to inevitability is false. There are always alternatives, even if they're hard to find and require you to face your fears. What makes the Frenzied Flame ending particularly effective from a storytelling perspective is that it's the only ending that feels genuinely apocalyptic. The other endings change the political and metaphysical order of the world, but life continues in some form. The Frenzied Flame ending shows you the actual end of everything. The screen goes dark, the world burns. There's no ambiguity about whether this is good or bad. It's just over. Some players choose this ending because they're angry at the world of Elden Ring and want to punish it. After dealing with all the suffering and horror and injustice that you witness throughout the game, burning it all down has a certain cathartic appeal. But the game seems to suggest that this is the wrong lesson to learn from suffering. Just because the world is broken doesn't mean it deserves to be annihilated. The other endings at least try to fix things or change things. The Frenzied Flame ending is giving up. Age of Duskborn. Fear's ending is about accepting death as a natural part of life and integrating those who live in death into the natural order instead of persecuting them. Fear is a deathbed companion, which is a role that involves lying with the dead and absorbing their life essence. In the Golden Order, this is considered heretical and disgusting, but Fear sees it as a sacred duty. She believes that death has been stigmatized and controlled by the Golden Order for too long, and she wants to create a world where death is honored rather than feared. To get this ending, you have to complete Fear's questline, which involves helping her lay with the corpse of Godwyn the Golden in the Deeproot Depths. Godwyn was the first demigod to die, and his death broke the Golden Order's control over death. But he didn't die properly. Only his soul was killed, leaving his body alive but mindless. This created the phenomenon of those who live in death, which are undead beings who exist in a liminal state between life and death. The Golden Order hunts them as abominations, but Fia wants to legitimize their existence. When you help Fia lie with Godwyn's corpse, she becomes pregnant with a mending rune. This is one of the strangest and most disturbing images in the game. She's essentially using Godwyn's corrupted body to birth a new principle that will be added to the Elden Ring, the mending rune of the Death Prince, which you can use to repair the Elden Ring and create the Age of Duskborn. The ending cutscene shows the Erd tree with dark roots spreading beneath it, and the world is remade to include death as a natural part of the cycle. Those who live in death are no longer hunted, they're accepted as a valid form of existence. The living and the dead can coexist. This sounds positive, like a more inclusive and accepting world, but the game leaves the implications ambiguous. The Golden Order's control over death was tyrannical, but it also served a purpose. It created a cycle where souls returned to the Erd tree and were reborn. This gave life meaning and structure. The Age of Duskborn disrupts that cycle by allowing undeath to persist. What happens to a world where the dead don't stay dead and the boundary between life and death becomes porous? Does it lead to a richer understanding of existence, or does it lead to stagnation and decay? Fia's character is tragic because she's genuinely trying to do something good, but she's also been marginalized and abused by society. Deathbed companions are treated as prostitutes, or worse, they're seen as necrophiliacs who defile the dead. Fia has internalized this stigma to some degree. She apologizes for her presence. She acts subservient, but she also has a core of iron conviction that what she's doing is right and necessary. Her relationship with Dee, Hunter of the Dead, is one of the most emotionally resonant conflicts in the game. Dee is a zealot who kills those who live in death on sight because he believes they're abominations against the Golden Order. When Dee discovers that Fia is helping the undead, he tries to kill her. She kills him first in self-defense. Later, you meet Dee's brother, who is also named Dee because they share a soul in two bodies. The brother wants revenge. If you give him Dee's armor, he'll kill Fia. This creates a moral dilemma for the player. Do you protect Fia and enable her quest? Or do you side with Dee and uphold the Golden Order's prohibition against undeath? The lore behind those who live in death connects to Godwyn's death and the Night of Black Knives. When Ranni had Godwyn killed to free herself from the Two Fingers, she only killed his soul, not his body. His body became the source of a corruption that spread through the roots of the Erd tree, creating a death blight that transforms people into undead. These undead are stuck between existence and non-existence. They're not alive in the way the Golden Order defines life, but they're not gone either. They're in pain, confused, often hostile. Fia's solution is to legitimize their existence by making undeath part of the natural order. Instead of fighting against it, accept it. Let the dead linger if they want to. Create a space in the world for beings who don't fit into the neat categories of living and dead. This is philosophically similar to Ranni's ending, in that both are about expanding the definition of what counts as a valid form of existence. But where Ranni removes the gods entirely, Fia wants to reform the system from within by adding death as an equal partner to life. The Age of Duskborn could be read as a commentary on how societies treat death and grief. The Golden Order's approach is to sanitize death, control it, make it fit into a neat cycle where it's not messy or scary. But death is messy, grief is complicated. People don't always move on cleanly. By creating space for those who live in death, Fia is creating space for the complexity of grief and loss. But there's also a darker reading. Undeath in Elden Ring is not portrayed as peaceful or dignified. The undead you encounter are often in agony. They attack you mindlessly. Godwyn's corpse is a writhing mass of flesh that spreads corruption wherever it touches. By making this a permanent part of the world, are you condemning people to an eternity of suffering as undead, or are you giving them the freedom to exist on their own terms? The Rune of Death, which is the aspect of the Elden Ring that Marika removed and gave to Maliketh, plays a crucial role in understanding this ending. When Marika removed death from the Elden Ring, She created a world where her chosen people couldn't die, but she also created a world where death lost its meaning. The Age of Duskborn restores some of death's power, but not in the way the Rune of Death originally functioned. It's a compromise between the deathless world of the Golden Order and the natural cycle of death that existed before. Fia's final words to you are about how she wants to be a mother to those who live in death. She's literally giving birth to a new principle through her union with Godwyn's corpse, but she's also metaphorically nurturing a rejected and persecuted group. The ending is about compassion for the outcasts, but it's also about the dangers of trying to mother something that might be fundamentally incompatible with life. Understanding the Elden Ring. To really understand what's at stake in each ending, you need to understand what the Elden Ring is and how it functions. It's not just a physical object, it's a collection of great runes that define the laws of nature in the lands between. Each rune represents a fundamental principle: life, death, order, causality. When Marika shattered the ring, she scattered these runes, and the demigods each claimed pieces. Godric got a rune that let him graft body parts onto himself. Radahn got a rune that gave him massive strength. Rykard got a rune that let him merge with a god-devouring serpent. The Elden Ring was created or imposed by the Greater Will, which is an outer god that represents order and control. The Greater Will used the Elden Beast as its agent to deliver the ring to the lands between and establish the Golden Order. But the Greater Will is just one of several outer gods that want to control this world. There's the Formless Mother that grants blood power, the god of rot that infected Melania, the Frenzied Flame that wants to burn everything. Each of these gods has its own vision for what the world should be. Marika was chosen as the vessel for the Greater Will's order. She became a god, but being a god in Elden Ring doesn't mean you're all-powerful. It means you're a host for an outer god's power. You're a puppet with delusions of agency. Marika figured this out at some point, which is why she shattered the ring. She was trying to break free from the Greater Will's control, but Radagon, her other half, tried to stop her. The result was the Shattering, a cataclysmic event that broke the world and started a war between demigods. Each ending represents a different answer to the question of what should happen to the Elden Ring. Should it be repaired and the Golden Order restored? Should it be reshaped according to a different outer god's principles? Should it be destroyed entirely? Your choice determines not just who rules the lands between, but what fundamental laws govern reality itself. The two fingers serve as the Greater Will's intermediaries, but they're not infallible. They communicate with the Greater Will through a process that takes thousands of years, which means their guidance is based on information that's incredibly out of date. When you kill the Elden Beast and claim the ring, the two fingers don't have an answer for what you should do next. They're still waiting for instructions from a god that may have stopped paying attention to this world centuries ago. This is why the endings matter. You're not just choosing a political system. You're choosing which outer god gets to write the rules of reality. Or in some endings, you're choosing to reject all of them and create something new. The game trusts you to make this decision without a clear moral framework. It doesn't tell you which ending is good or evil. It gives you information and lets you decide what to do with it. The nature of the Erd Tree itself is important to understanding the endings. The Erd Tree is not a natural tree. It's a manifestation of the Greater Will's power, a giant parasitic organism that feeds on death and rebirth. When people die in the Golden Order, their souls are supposed to return to the tree's roots and be recycled into new life. But the tree is damaged now, burned, and corrupted. In some endings, you restore it. In others, you replace it with something else. In the Frenzied Flame ending, you burn it to ash. The relationship between the Elden Ring and the Erd Tree is symbiotic. The ring defines the laws that the tree enforces through its roots. When the ring was whole, the tree was golden and radiant. When the ring shattered, the tree began to die. Repairing the ring in different ways changes what the tree represents and what kind of power it has over the world. Each great rune you collect from the demigods gives you a glimpse into what aspect of the Elden Ring it represents. Godric's rune enhances all attributes, suggesting it's connected to the principle of growth and power. Radahn's rune increases health, stamina, and equipment load, suggesting it's connected to physical strength and endurance. Rykard's rune restores health when you kill enemies, suggesting it's connected to predation and consumption. These aren't just game mechanics, they're hints about what fundamental forces the Elden Ring controls: Marika and Radagon. The revelation that Marika and Radagon are the same person is the central twist of the game's lore, and it recontextualizes everything you thought you knew about the Golden Order. Marika is the goddess who established the Order. Radagon is the champion who served her and eventually became her consort. But they're not two separate people, they're two aspects of the same being. This duality is hinted at throughout the game through statues and item descriptions. There's a statue in Leyndell that shows a figure that's half Marika, half Radagon. There's a message you can find that says Radagon is Marika. When you fight the final boss, Marika's body transforms into Radagon for the first phase of the fight. They share a body, but they have different wills and different goals. Marika wanted to break free from the greater will. Radagon wanted to remain loyal to it. This internal conflict is what caused the shattering to fail. When Marika shattered the ring, Radagon tried to repair it from within. The result was a broken god with a broken ring, unable to either fully rebel or fully comply with the greater will's commands. They're trapped in a state of eternal conflict. The question of how and why they became one being is never fully explained. One theory points to the fact that Radagon was originally married to Renala before he left her to marry Marika. The split might have happened when Radagon was recalled from Liurnia to become Elden Lord. Another theory suggests that Marika created Radagon as a tool, or that they were always one being and Radagon was just a disguise. The game deliberately leaves this ambiguous. What's clear is that their duality represents the fundamental tension in the Golden Order itself. The Order demands perfection and obedience, but it's maintained by a god who doubts and rebels. This contradiction is what Goldmask identifies as the core problem that needs to be fixed. You can't have a perfect eternal order if the god maintaining it is capable of changing their mind. Marika's history before she became a god is mostly unknown, but item descriptions suggest she was a Newman from a place outside the Lands Between. The Newman were a race of people who came from somewhere else, possibly fleeing persecution or seeking opportunity. Marika's rise to godhood might have been a way to protect her people, but it required her to serve the greater will and enforce its order. The Golden Order, under Marika's rule, was expansionist and brutal. She led wars against the giants of the mountaintops, the dragons, the ancient dynasty of the underground cities. She crushed anything that threatened the order or represented an alternative source of power. But item descriptions also show that she had moments of doubt. She questioned the greater will. She wondered if there was another way. Radagon, by contrast, is portrayed as a fanatic. He's described as a true believer in the Golden Order who would do anything to preserve it. When he married Renala, he studied sorcery and tried to merge it with the Golden Order's incantations. When he became Elden Lord, he tried to suppress everything that didn't fit the Order's ideals. His loyalty was absolute, which makes his union with Marika even more tragic. They're one being with completely opposed philosophies. The children they had together reflect this duality. Melania and Miquella are Empyreans, beings who could potentially become gods, but they're both cursed. Melania with scarlet rot, Miquella with eternal childhood. Some item descriptions suggest that these curses are a result of Radagon and Marika's union. When a god mates with themselves, the offspring are born flawed. This could be read as a metaphor for the Golden Order's internal contradictions, producing broken outcomes. When you fight Radagon as a boss, he uses the same hammer that he once used to try to repair the Elden Ring. The weapon is both a tool of creation and a weapon of war. This symbolizes his dual role as both preserver and destroyer. He's trying to maintain the order that Marika tried to break, but in doing so, he's become a barrier to any possibility of change or growth. The final form of the boss fight, the Elden Beast, is what the Greater Will sent to establish the Golden Order in the first place. It's a cosmic entity that lives inside the Elden Ring. When you kill it, you're not just defeating Marika and Radagon, you're rejecting the Greater Will's claim to control this world. Every ending starts with you killing the avatar of the god that created the system you're now choosing to reshape or destroy. The Knight of Black Knives. The Knight of Black Knives is the inciting incident that led to the shattering, and understanding what happened that night is crucial to understanding Rani's ending and the nature of death in this world. On that night, a group of assassins wielding knives imbued with the rune of death attacked the demigods. They killed Godwyn the Golden, the first demigod to die. But Godwyn wasn't the only victim. Rani orchestrated her own death at the same time. The assassins were Numen women who had close ties to Marika, which suggests that Marika either knew about the plot or was involved in it. The knives they used were fragments of the rune of death, which Marika had removed from the Elden Ring and given to Malekith to guard. Somehow, Rani stole a fragment of the rune and used it to create the black knives that could kill gods. What makes the Night of Black Knives unique is that it involved splitting death itself. Normally, death is the simultaneous end of body and soul, but Rani used a ritual to split death into two halves. One half killed Godwyn's soul, leaving his body alive. The other half killed Rani's body, leaving her soul alive. This created two incomplete deaths that have had catastrophic consequences. Godwyn's soulless body became the source of the death blight. Without a soul to guide it, his flesh grew and mutated, spreading roots through the Erd tree and corrupting everything it touched. Those who live in death are created when this corruption touches corpses and reanimates them without souls. Godwyn is described as the Prince of Death, an unwilling progenitor of a new form of cursed existence. Rani's soulless body was discarded, but her soul lived on. She created a doll to inhabit and continued to exist as a spirit. This freed her from the Two Fingers' control, because they could only communicate with Empyreans through their physical bodies. By killing her flesh, she severed the connection and gained independence at the cost of her humanity. The question of why Godwyn was chosen as the target is important. Godwyn was Marika's firstborn son and the most beloved of the demigods. He was known as the Golden, a hero of the war against the dragons who befriended the ancient dragon Fortisax. His death was a tragedy that shook the entire world, but it was also strategically necessary for Rani's plan. She needed a demigod's death to split with her own so that both deaths would be incomplete. Some item descriptions suggest that Marika orchestrated the whole thing. She wanted Godwyn dead because his perfection represented everything the Golden Order demanded, and she had come to hate the Order. By killing her golden child, she was making a statement about the emptiness of the ideals he represented. But this is speculation based on fragments of text. The game never confirms Marika's involvement. What's certain is that the Night of Black Knives was the beginning of the end for the Golden Order. Godwyn's death proved that demigods could die, which shattered the illusion of their immortality. Marika's grief and rage led her to shatter the Elden Ring. The demigods went to war over the great runes. The world fell into chaos, all because Rani wanted to be free and was willing to kill a god to achieve it. The Black Knife assassins themselves are still active in the world, hunting targets for unknown masters. You encounter them as enemies throughout the game. They're incredibly dangerous, fast, and silent. Their armor describes them as women who were rumored to be Numen, with close ties to Marika herself. This connection between Marika and the assassins is never fully explained, but it suggests a conspiracy that goes deeper than Rani acting alone. Malekith, the holder of the Rune of Death, failed in his duty to protect it. When fragments of the rune were stolen and used to kill Godwyn, Malekith was consumed by guilt and shame. He's described as Marika's shadow, a beast bound to serve and protect her. His failure to prevent Godwyn's death broke something in him. When you fight him as a boss, he's desperate and terrified, attacking with the ferocity of someone who knows they've already lost everything. The Rune of Death itself is described as the principle of destined death that was removed from the Elden Ring by Marika. In the age before the Golden Order, death was natural and inevitable. But Marika wanted to create a world where her chosen people couldn't die. So she removed death from the natural order and locked it away. This created the immortality of the demigods, but it also created a world where death became twisted and unnatural. The undead, the death root, the corruption spreading from Godwyn's corpse, all of it stems from death being removed from its proper place in the cycle of life. The outer gods, the greater will, is the most prominent outer god in Elden Ring, but it's far from the only one. Understanding the cosmology of outer gods is essential to understanding what's really at stake in the endings. These aren't gods in the traditional sense of all-powerful creators. They're cosmic forces or entities that want to impose their will on the world. They're parasitic, using mortals and Empyreans as vessels to manifest their power. The greater will represents order, control, and hierarchy. It created or imposed the Elden Ring and used Marika as its vessel to establish the Golden Order. Its agents are the two fingers, which appear throughout the lands between, to guide mortals towards serving the greater will's interests. But as the game progresses, you learn that the two fingers are slow and possibly out of touch with what the greater will actually wants. The Formless Mother is an outer god associated with blood and curses. Mog, one of the demigod bosses, serves the Formless Mother and uses blood sorceries that draw power from her. The Formless Mother seems to be about transformation through violence and blood sacrifice. Mog's goal is to create a new dynasty by kidnapping Miquella and using his blood to ascend to godhood. This represents an alternative path to power that bypasses the greater will entirely. The god of rot is sealed beneath the lake of rot, and it's the source of the scarlet rot that infected Malenia. Scarlet rot is a plague that consumes everything it touches, turning flesh into rot and spreading like wildfire. The god of rot seems to represent decay and corruption as a form of transformation. There's an entire underground civilization that once worshipped this god before it was sealed away by a blind swordsman. The Frenzied Flame is the outer god of chaos and madness. It wants to burn away all distinction and return the world to the primordial state of oneness. Its agents are the three fingers, which are the opposite counterpart to the two fingers. Where the two fingers represent the greater will's order, the three fingers represent the rejection of that order. The Frenzied Flame doesn't want to rule. It wants to end existence. The dark moon that Ranni serves is possibly another outer god, or it's a force that exists outside the framework of outer gods entirely. The moon is associated with fate and cold and the stars. Ranni's ending involves replacing the greater will's influence with the moon's influence, but the game is deliberately vague about whether this is just replacing one master with another, or if it's genuinely different. Each outer god seems to have Empyreans, which are chosen vessels who can become gods. Marika was an Empyrean who became the vessel for the greater will. Malenia and Miquella are Empyreans who could potentially serve other outer gods. Ranni was an Empyrean designated for the greater will, but she rejected that fate and chose the moon instead. The game suggests that Empyreans are rare and special, born with the potential to host cosmic power. The competition between outer gods is the real conflict underlying all of Elden Ring's story. The shattering, the war between demigods, the various endings, they're all just pieces in a larger game being played by cosmic entities that view mortals as tools. Your choice of ending is essentially a choice of which outer god you want to empower, or whether you want to reject them all. There's also the question of whether the outer gods are conscious entities with plans and desires, or if they're more like forces of nature that mortals interpret as gods. The game never shows you an outer god directly, except for the Elden Beast, which is the greater will's vassal rather than the god itself. Everything you know about outer gods comes from the interpretations of mortals who serve them, which means the information is unreliable. Some item descriptions suggest that the outer gods are drawn to the lands between because of the Erd Tree and the Elden Ring. These are sources of immense power, and any cosmic entity would want to control them. The history of the lands between before the Golden Order is murky, but there are hints that other gods ruled in the past. The Age of Dragons, the Age of the Crucible, the Age of the Underground Cities. Each era might have been dominated by a different outer god until the greater will asserted dominance. The role of the Elden Ring as a kind of universal remote control for reality makes it a prize worth fighting over. Whoever controls the ring controls the fundamental laws of existence in this world. That's why Marika shattering it was such a catastrophic act. She didn't just break a political system, she broke the mechanism that kept hostile outer gods from invading and reshaping reality according to their preferences. Your character, the Tarnished, is uniquely positioned to decide the fate of the world because you're not bound to any outer god by default. You are exiled from the lands between and stripped of grace, which means you don't owe loyalty to the greater will, but you've been called back and given grace again, for reasons that are never fully explained. Some dialogue suggests that Marika herself called the Tarnished back as part of her plan to overthrow the Greater Will. If that's true, then your role isn't to restore the Order, it's to finish what Marika started and free the world from divine control. Miquella and Malenia are two of the most tragic and important characters in Elden Ring's lore. Even though Miquella never appears in the base game except as a withered corpse in a cocoon, they're twins, both Empyreans, both cursed from birth. Malenia with scarlet rot that slowly consumes her body. Miquella with eternal childhood that prevents him from ever growing up. Despite their curses, they're described as the most fearsome of all the demigods. Miquella is portrayed as the most brilliant and compassionate of Marika's children. He rejected the Golden Order because he saw that it had no answer for his sister's curse or for his own. So he founded his own order, the Order of Unalloyed Gold, which was supposed to be free from the influence of outer gods. He created a needle that could suppress the scarlet rot in Malenia's body. He grew the Halig tree as an alternative to the Erd tree, a safe haven for those rejected by the Golden Order. But Miquella's plan failed. He tried to use the Halig tree to cure his curse and grow into an adult. But before he could complete the process, his half-brother Mog kidnapped him. Mog wanted to use Miquella's power to become a god and start a new dynasty. When you find Miquella, he's trapped in a cocoon, drained of life, his body withered, and his dream of a better world unfulfilled. Malenia, meanwhile, became one of the greatest warriors in the world despite her curse. She fought Radahn to a standstill in a battle that's legendary in the lore. During that fight, she unleashed the Scarlet Rot fully, transforming into the Goddess of Rot and nuking the entire region of Caelid. Radahn survived, but was driven insane by the Rot, condemned to wander the desert, eating corpses while his mind deteriorated. Malenia herself fell into a coma and was carried back to the Halig tree by one of her knights. When you fight Malenia as a boss, she's waiting at the roots of the Halig tree, guarding Miquella's cocoon, even though he's already been taken. She doesn't know he's gone. She's still loyal, still waiting for him to wake up and fulfill his promise to cure her. Her boss fight is famously difficult, and in the second phase, she transforms into the Goddess of Rot, sprouting wings made of scarlet flowers. This is her curse in full bloom, the moment where she becomes the thing she spent her whole life trying to resist. The tragedy of Miquella and Malenia is that they represent the possibility of something better than the Golden Order, but they were destroyed by the very forces they were trying to escape. Miquella's compassion led him to create a refuge for the rejected, but his vulnerability led to his kidnapping and the failure of his dream. Malenia's strength made her unbeatable in combat, but her curse made her a weapon of mass destruction that killed thousands when she used it. There's a deep irony in Malenia's title. She calls herself the Blade of Miquella, defining her entire existence around her loyalty to her brother. But Miquella is gone, and she doesn't know. She's a blade without a purpose, still standing guard over an empty cocoon. When you kill her, you're not just defeating a boss, you're ending her centuries-long vigil and releasing her from a promise she can never fulfill. Miquella's needle, which can suppress the influence of outer gods, is one of the most important items in the game's lore. It proves that it's possible to resist the outer gods, that they're not all-powerful. The needle can cure Millicent of Scarlet Rot. It can remove the Frenzied Flame from your character. It represents Miquella's philosophy that mortals don't have to be slaves to cosmic forces. They can use intelligence and craft to create tools that give them agency. But the needle is also fragile. It breaks. It needs to be repaired. It only works if you use it in specific locations where the flow of time is distorted. This suggests that resisting outer gods is possible but difficult and temporary. You can't permanently free yourself from their influence. You can only create moments of clarity where you make your own choices. The Halig tree itself is a monument to Miquella's failure. It's a beautiful, massive tree that was supposed to rival the Erd tree, but it's rotting from within. The scarlet rot that Malenia carries has infected it. The Albinaurics and rejected people who came there seeking refuge are dying or going mad. The dream of a perfect sanctuary free from the Golden Order's cruelty has turned into another nightmare. Some players have theorized that Miquella is still alive inside the cocoon and that his story will continue in DLC. which turned out to be partially correct with the Shadow of the Erdtree expansion. But in the base game, his story ends with failure. The most brilliant and compassionate demigod tried to create a better world and was destroyed before he could finish. This reinforces one of the game's central themes. Good intentions aren't enough. The world is hostile to change, and even the strongest and smartest people can fail. The relationship between Miquella and Malenia also reflects the theme of codependency and loyalty. Malenia defined herself entirely through her relationship with Miquella. She had no identity outside of being his blade. This made her incredibly effective as a warrior and protector, but it also meant she had no purpose when he was gone. She couldn't move on, couldn't accept that he might be lost. She just waited. Forever, because that's what a blade does. Godfrey and the Tarnished. Godfrey was the first Elden Lord, Marika's first consort, and the leader of the Tarnished before they were exiled from the lands between. Understanding Godfrey's story helps explain why you, the player character, exist and what role you're meant to play in Marika's plan. Godfrey was a warrior chieftain named Hoara Lux before he became Elden Lord. He led armies for Marika during the wars that established the Golden Order. He fought the giants, the dragons, the ancient enemies of the Erdtree. He was brutal and savage, but Marika needed that brutality to conquer the world. She gave him a lion spirit named Serosh to suppress his bloodlust and make him civilized enough to rule as Elden Lord. But once the wars were over and peace was established, Godfrey and his warriors were no longer useful. Marika stripped them of grace, the golden light that marked them as chosen by the Erdtree, and exiled them from the lands between. They became the Tarnished, people without grace wandering the outside world. Godfrey led them into exile, and they built new lives outside the lands between. Then, after Marika shattered the Elden Ring and the shattering began, grace was restored to the Tarnished. Dead Tarnished woke up. Living Tarnished saw the guidance of grace, pointing them back to the lands between. Godfrey himself was called back, but not in his civilized form as Elden Lord. He returned as Hoara Lux, the warrior without restraint, having torn Serosh from his back and reclaimed his savage nature. When you fight Godfrey as a boss near the end of the game, he recognizes you as a fellow Tarnished. He's proud that one of his people made it this far. In the second phase of the fight, he becomes Hoara Lux and fights you with his bare hands, no longer bound by the rules of civilized combat. This is who he really is. Not the Golden Lord on the throne, but the savage warrior who carved out an empire through violence. The role of the Tarnished in Marika's plan is ambiguous. Some item descriptions suggest that she exiled Godfrey and his warriors knowing that she would call them back later. She needed people who were outside the Golden Order system, who weren't bound by its rules, who could do what the demigods couldn't. The Tarnished are mercenaries, pragmatists, people who fight for glory and power rather than divine mandate. Your character is one of the Tarnished who answered the call of grace. You're not special in terms of bloodline or divine blessing. You're just someone who refused to stay dead and fought your way through impossible odds. The game's opening shows various other Tarnished who are also trying to become Elden Lord. Goldmask, Fear, Dung Eater, Gideon Ofnir, they're all competing for the same prize. You win not because you're chosen, but because you're stronger and more persistent than everyone else. This makes the ending more meaningful. You're not fulfilling a prophecy or destiny. You're making a choice. Marika called you back, but she didn't tell you what to do once you claimed the Elden Ring. That's up to you. You can restore the order she hated. You can burn the world. You can reshape reality according to your own vision. The fact that you're not bound by divine mandate means your choice actually matters. Godfrey's story also parallels your journey. He was a warrior who became a lord, who became a warrior again. He built a civilization and then watched it crumble. He served a god who betrayed him. When you fight him, you're essentially fighting a version of yourself who succeeded in becoming Elden Lord once before, and saw how hollow that victory was. His recognition of you as kin is both a compliment and a warning. You're about to claim the throne he lost. Will you do better than he did, or will you repeat his mistakes? The Tarnished, as a group, represent everyone who was rejected by the Golden Order and forced to make their own way. They're not blessed by the Erdtree. They don't have grace until Marika decides to give it back to them. They're outsiders, Mercenaries, people who fight for practical reasons rather than religious ones. This makes them dangerous to the established order, because they have nothing to lose and everything to gain. Gideon Ofnir, the All-Knowing, is another Tarnished who becomes a boss fight late in the game. He's been researching the demigods and collecting knowledge about the Elden Ring. But when he learns what Marika actually wants, he tries to stop you. He says that Marika wants the Tarnished to struggle forever, to fight and die, and never actually succeed in becoming Elden Lord. According to Gideon, the whole thing is a cruel game designed to keep the Tarnished occupied while the gods work out their own problems. But Gideon might be wrong. He's called the All-Knowing, but he doesn't actually know everything. His interpretation of Marika's will is based on incomplete information. The fact that you can become Elden Lord and reshape the world suggests that Marika's plan wasn't to trap the Tarnished in an endless struggle, but to give them a genuine chance to change things. She shattered the ring because she wanted it broken. She called back the Tarnished because she wanted someone from outside the system to decide what comes next. The lands between, the geography of the lands between, is not just a setting. It's a narrative tool that tells the story of the world's history and the conflicts between different factions and gods. Each region you explore has its own history, its own tragedies, its own connection to the larger themes of the game. Limgrave is where you start, and it's the most visually normal region. Green fields, ruined castles, wandering enemies. But even here, there are signs of the world's corruption. The walking corpses, the death root growing from graves, the giants that have been enslaved and forced to pull caravans. Limgrave was Godric's territory, and Godric is described as the weakest of the demigods, a runt who grafted other people's body parts onto himself to become stronger. Liurnia of the Lakes is where the Academy of Raya Lucaria stands. This is the center of glintstone sorcery, a form of magic that predates the Golden Order and draws power from the primeval current, rather than the Erd Tree. The Academy is technically neutral in the Shattering, but Renala, its leader, has been driven insane by grief after Radagon left her. The region is full of scholars, sorcerers, and creatures created through magical experiments. Caelid is a nightmare landscape of scarlet rot. The entire region was destroyed during the battle between Malenia and Radahn. When Malenia unleashed the goddess of rot, she turned Caelid into a hellscape of mutated creatures and spreading plague. Radahn is still there, driven mad by rot, but his gravitational magic is keeping the stars frozen in place, which is preventing Ranni's fate from progressing. You have to kill him to let the stars move again. Altus Plateau and the capital city of Leyndell represent the heart of the Golden Order. This is where Morgott rules, one of the few demigods who's still trying to maintain the old system. But even here, the Order is crumbling. The outer wall is under siege. The capital is full of soldiers who've gone mad. The sewers beneath the city are filled with omens who were cast out at birth. Leyndell shows you what the Golden Order looks like at its peak and its decline. The mountaintops of the giants is where Marika waged war against the giants, who tended the flame of ruin. She killed their god and forced the last giant to tend the forge but could burn the Erd Tree. This region is covered in snow and filled with the frozen corpses of giants. It's a monument to genocide, a reminder that the Golden Order was built on the bones of everyone who came before it. The underground regions, Siofa River, Ainsel River, Nokron, and Nokstella are the remains of the eternal cities that were punished by the Greater Will for challenging the Golden Order. These cities worshipped the stars and created a false night sky. They built silver automatons and practiced forms of magic that the Golden Order considered heretical. Their punishment was to be buried underground, cut off from the sky they worshipped. Deep-root depths is where Godwyn's corpse lies, spreading death blight through the roots of the Erd Tree. It's a massive underground cavern filled with corrupted roots and undead. This is where Fia goes to lie with Godwyn and birth the mending rune of the Death Prince. It's the physical manifestation of death's corruption, spreading through the foundation of the Golden Order. Farum Azula is a crumbling city floating in a storm outside of time. This is where the ancient dragons lived before the Golden Order, and it's where Maliketh guards the Rune of Death. Time works strangely here. Events that happened in the past and future seem to overlap. Fighting through Farum Azula feels like travelling through the ruins of history itself. Each region tells a story of conquest and resistance. The Golden Order spread through war and suppression. Every alternative source of power was crushed or assimilated. The giants were genocided. The dragons were defeated. The underground cities were buried. The sorcerers were forced into academic isolation. The game's world is a graveyard of defeated civilizations, and the shattering is what happens when the victorious civilization starts tearing itself apart. The verticality of the world is also meaningful. The Erdtree towers above everything, visible from every region. The underground cities are buried deep below. The capital sits in the middle, accessible only by climbing through the intermediate regions. The symbolism is clear. The Golden Order imposed a hierarchy not just politically, but physically, putting itself literally above everyone else. Environmental storytelling fills in details that dialogue doesn't provide. The way Caelid's rot spreads shows you how destructive Malenia's curse is. The frozen corpses in the mountaintops show you the brutality of Marika's conquest. The elegant architecture of the eternal cities shows you what was lost when they were destroyed. You don't need an NPC to explain these things. The world itself tells the story. Understanding the geography helps you understand the endings. When you reshape the Elden Ring, you're not just changing politics, you're changing what happens to all these regions and the people who live in them. The Age of Fracture might restore the capital, but won't help Caelid or the underground cities. The Age of Stars might free everyone from divine control, but leaves them to deal with practical problems like rot and death on their own. The Frenzied Flame burns it all indiscriminately. Your choice of ending is a choice about which of these places and people deserve to continue existing. The dragons. The ancient dragons are one of the oldest powers in the lands between, predating the Golden Order. Their history is fragmented across item descriptions and environmental details, but piecing it together reveals a civilization that was powerful enough to challenge the gods before it fell. Placidu Sax was the Elden Lord before the Golden Order existed, serving a god whose identity is never revealed. This god fled or disappeared, leaving Placidu Sax waiting in Farum Azula outside of time for its return. When you fight Placidu Sax as a boss, you're fighting the remnant of a previous age, a dragon who's been waiting for countless centuries for a god who's never coming back. The ancient dragons used lightning, and their stone scales were nearly indestructible. They were worshipped, or at least respected, by ancient humans who learned to channel dragon lightning through incantations. Gravel stone seals and dragon cult incantations found throughout the game show that dragon worship was once widespread before the Golden Order suppressed it. Then came the war between the Golden Order and the dragons. The details are vague, but the outcome was clear. The dragons lost. Most were killed. Some fled to Farum Azula. A few, like Fortisax and Lanciax, made peace with the Golden Order and fought alongside its champions. Godwyn the Golden famously befriended Fortisax, which led to a lasting peace between dragons and the Order. But when Godwyn died and his body began spreading deathblight, Fortisax entered the corruption trying to save his friend. The dragon fought the death from within Godwyn's corpse, trying to preserve what was left of him. When you encounter Fortisax in Deeproot Depths, the dragon is still fighting, still trying to save Godwyn, even though it's a hopeless battle. It's a tragedy of loyalty and futility. The dragon communion that some NPCs practice involves eating dragon hearts to gain their power. This is considered heretical by the Golden Order because it's consuming the flesh of creatures that were once enemies. But desperate people seek power wherever they can find it, and dragon hearts grant transformation at the cost of slowly turning the consumer into a Wyrm, a degraded form of dragon. There's a parallel between the dragons and the Tarnished. Both were defeated by the Golden Order, both were cast out, and both have a chance to return and reshape the world. The difference is that the dragons are mostly gone, their civilization reduced to ruins and a few survivors. The Tarnished are still numerous enough to be a threat, but the dragon's fate might be a preview of what happens to anyone who challenges the Order and loses. The distinction between ancient dragons and modern drakes is important. Ancient dragons like Placidu Sax had stone scales and used red lightning. Modern drakes are weaker, with organic scales and no special powers. The implication is that true dragons are almost extinct, and what remains are degraded descendants. This fits the theme of decline. that runs through the entire game. Everything is a lesser version of what it used to be. Dragon incantations require faith and arcane stats, which suggests that dragon worship was a religious practice that involved both devotion and hidden knowledge. The incantations call down lightning and grant dragon-like abilities. They're powerful but dangerous, reflecting the duality of dragons as both majestic and destructive. When you use dragon smithing stones to upgrade weapons to maximum level, you're using materials that came from dragons. Their bodies are literally being used as tools by the people who defeated them. This is another example of the Golden Order's brutality. It doesn't just defeat enemies, it harvests them and uses their remains to strengthen itself. The Age of Dragons that came before the Golden Order might have been better or worse than what followed. The game doesn't tell you. Placidus Sax served a god that disappeared, which suggests that even the Dragon Age had its problems. Maybe every age is flawed because they're all built on the same pattern of one power dominating others through force. The endings you can choose might just be continuing that cycle with different aesthetics. The giants and the flame, the fire giants, who lived on the mountaintops, were the guardians of the flame of ruin, a power that could burn the Erd Tree. This made them an existential threat to the Golden Order, so Marika waged a war of extermination against them. She killed their god, the fell god of fire, and slaughtered the giants until only one remained. The last giant was kept alive for a specific purpose. His job is to tend the forge of the giants, which is the only thing that can create a fire hot enough to burn the Erd Tree. This is a layer of irony that defines the Golden Order's cruelty. They genocided the giants to protect the Erd Tree, but they kept one giant alive because they knew they might need to burn the tree someday. They built their own destruction into the system as a failsafe. When you reach the forge and need to burn the Erd Tree to progress, you have two options. You can kill the last giant and use the flame normally, or you can spare him and inherit the Frenzied Flame instead. If you spare him, he doesn't thank you. He doesn't help you. He just keeps tending the forge because that's the only thing he knows how to do. His entire people were destroyed, and he's a slave maintaining the weapon that could have saved them if they'd used it first. The Flame of Ruin is described as the antithesis of the Erd Tree, where the tree represents life and growth and order, the flame represents destruction and chaos, and the end of all things. The giants worshipped this destructive force, which from the Golden Order's perspective made them enemies that had to be eliminated. But from another perspective, the flame represents freedom from the Erd Tree's control. It's the power to burn away the existing order and start fresh. The fell god that the giants worshipped was sealed inside the last giant's chest. You can see its face in the giant's body when you fight him. The god is still alive but imprisoned, forced to watch as its last worshipper tends the forge that will eventually be used against the very tree the giants fought against. This is maximum humiliation. The Golden Order didn't just defeat the giants. It perverted their religion and turned it into a tool for its own purposes. Trolls, which you fight throughout the game, are related to giants but were subverted by the Golden Order. They were forced to serve as soldiers and labourers. Some trolls have the Erd Tree emblem carved into their chests, showing their enslavement. The ones on the mountaintops still have giant faces, but the ones in other regions have been so thoroughly domesticated that they barely remember their origins. The genocide of the giants is presented as historical fact, without much moral commentary. The game shows you what happened and lets you draw your own conclusions. The mountaintops are filled with giant corpses frozen in the snow. Some are in positions that suggest they were fleeing. Some were fighting. The Golden Order was thorough. It didn't leave survivors. It turned an entire species into a cautionary tale about what happens when you oppose the Erd Tree. When you use the forge to burn the Erd Tree, you're completing a cycle that started with the giant war. The giants couldn't burn the tree because they were killed first, but their flame survived, and now a Tarnished is using it to do what the giants wanted to do all along. There's a kind of justice in that, even if it's accidental. The Flame of Ruin and the Frenzied Flame are different. The Flame of Ruin is a controlled fire that can burn the Erd Tree without destroying the world. The Frenzied Flame is chaos that wants to burn everything. Confusing them is a mistake some players make, but the game is clear that they're separate forces with separate origins and purposes. You can use the Flame of Ruin without embracing the Frenzied Flame, but the Three Fingers offer themselves as an alternative. if you want to skip the giant forge. The relationship between fire and the Erd tree is complex. Fire is needed to access the tree's interior, but it's also the thing that can destroy the tree permanently. This duality runs through all of Elden Ring's symbolism. Creation and destruction are linked. You can't have one without the possibility of the other. The Golden Order tried to suppress fire and control it, but fire can't be controlled forever. Eventually, it breaks free and burns what it was meant to protect. Morgott and Mohg are twin brothers, both born as omens to Marika and Godfrey. As children of the goddess, they should have been royalty, but because they were omens with horns and cursed blood, they were imprisoned beneath the capital and left to rot. This shaped everything they became. Morgott responded to his rejection by becoming the most loyal defender of the Golden Order. He calls himself the Veiled Monarch, and later, Morgott the Omen King. He holds Leyndell against all attackers, refusing to let any Tarnished claim the Elden Ring. He despises his siblings for abandoning the capital during the Shattering. He calls them traitors and willful traitors for giving up on the Erd tree. When you fight Morgott, he uses weapons associated with different demigods, showing that he's fought them all and learned their techniques. He's been defending the capital alone for years, maybe centuries. He's the only demigod who's actually trying to maintain the Golden Order instead of pursuing his own ambitions. And his reward for this loyalty is to be called an omen, to be rejected by the very system he's protecting. Morgott's tragedy is that he's defending an order that hates him. The Golden Order treated omens as abominations. They cut off omen horns in bloody rituals. They threw omen children into sewers. Morgott himself was imprisoned, despite being Marika's son. But he internalized the Order's values so completely that he sees himself as the rightful guardian rather than recognizing that he's a victim. When he dies, he says something about trusting in gold. He never lost faith, even though the faith never rewarded him. His loyalty was absolute and unreturned. The game presents this as both admirable and deeply sad. He had the strength to hold an entire capital city against armies, but he used that strength to defend a system that never wanted him. Mohg took the opposite path. He embraced his curse and sought power outside the Golden Order. He found the Formless Mother, an outer god of blood, and made a pact with her. He built a dynasty in the underground, gathering followers and creating a new order based on blood rather than gold. His plan was to kidnap Miquella, share his blood, and use Miquella's power to ascend to godhood. Mohg's boss fight takes place in a cathedral drenched in blood. He uses blood flame incantations and grows wings in his second phase. He's fully embraced the horror that the Golden Order called him. Where Morgott tried to prove he was worthy of the Order's acceptance, Mohg rejected the Order entirely and created his own vision of power. But Mohg's plan was doomed from the start. Miquella was already cursed with eternal childhood, and draining his blood just left him a withered corpse. Mohg's dynasty is built in a dark underground palace where sunlight never reaches. His followers are zealots who've been driven mad by blood rituals. He's created a mirror of the Golden Order's cruelty, just with different aesthetics. The contrast between the twins is stark. Same birth, same curse. Completely different responses. Morgott seeks acceptance by defending the system that hurt him. Mohg seeks power by rejecting the system and building his own. Neither approach works. Morgott dies defending a capital that's already lost. Morgott dies clutching a corpse that can't give him what he wants. Their shared childhood in the subterranean shunning grounds is hinted at through environmental storytelling. The sewers beneath Leyndell are filled with omens who are cast out. Some are chained to walls, some wander mindlessly. This is where Morgott and Mohg grew up, surrounded by the discarded and the cursed. That Morgott emerged from this wanting to protect the order that imprisoned him is almost incomprehensible unless you understand the psychology of abused people who cling to their abusers. Mohg's followers, the Pureblood Knights, have a quest line that shows the full horror of his blood cult. Vare, who you meet at the start of the game, tries to recruit you. If you follow his questline, you end up invading other players as a bloody finger and soaking cloth in the blood of maidens. The whole system is designed to spread violence and bloodshed in service of the Formless Mother. The item descriptions for Morgott's and Mohg's great runes show how their curse affected them. Morgott's rune greatly increases maximum HP suggesting his curse gave him vitality and endurance. Mohg's rune grants runes from summoned spirits dying nearby, suggesting his curse tied him to blood and death. Even their great runes reflect their different paths. When Morgott dies, his body dissolves into grace, suggesting that despite everything, he was still connected to the Erd Tree. When Mohg dies, his body remains, soaked in blood. The difference in their deaths reflects the difference in their lives. Morgott was accepted by the tree at the moment of death. Mohg remained forever outside its grace. Rennala and Radagon. Rennala was the head of the Academy of Raya Lucaria, a powerful sorceress who could manipulate the moon and command glintstone magic. She married Radagon when he was sent to conquer Liurnia during the Wars of the Golden Order. Instead of fighting, they fell in love. They had 3 children together, Rani, Radahn, and Rykard. For a time, there was peace between the Academy and the Golden Order. Then Radagon was called back to Leyndell to become Elden Lord after Godfrey was exiled. He left Rennala without explanation or mercy. He took his great rune back, the amber egg he'd given her as a wedding gift. Except actually, he left her the egg but took back the great rune inside it. The details are confusing and contradictory, which reflects how Rennala's mind shattered from grief and confusion. When you meet Rennala as a boss, she's hiding in the Academy's library, surrounded by her students, who've been forcibly rebirthed and turned into grotesque, childlike creatures. She's trying to use rebirth magic to bring Radagon back or to recreate what they had, but all she can do is create broken mockeries. The students sing a lullaby about their queen and attack you to protect her. In the first phase of the fight, you're actually fighting projections created by Ranni to protect her mother. Rennala herself is fragile and broken. She crawls on the ground, clutching the amber egg. She can barely defend herself, but when you break through Ranni's protection and confront Rennala directly, she manifests an illusion of her former power, summoning moon sorceries and spirit ashes in a desperate attempt to protect what's left of her dignity. After you defeat her, she doesn't die. She remains in the library, and you can use her rebirth magic to respect your character. She's still obsessed with rebirth, still trying to fix what's broken through magic. But she's cogent enough to perform the service, suggesting that her madness might be performative or cyclical. She has moments of clarity, surrounded by longer periods of grief-induced delusion. Radagon's betrayal of Rennala raises questions about whether he ever really loved her, or if it was always political. Was he genuine when they married, or was he always loyal to the Golden Order first? The game suggests that Radagon might have been created by Marika specifically to serve the Order, which means his marriage to Rennala could have been a tactical decision to neutralize the Academy as a threat, but their children suggest real connection. Ranni, Radahn, and Rykard are all demigods with their own agendas. Ranni rejects the Golden Order entirely. Radahn becomes a mighty warrior, but goes mad from rot. Rykard feeds himself to a god-devouring serpent. None of them are pawns. They're individuals who made their own choices. That kind of independence suggests they were raised with some kind of genuine love, even if their father eventually abandoned them. The amber egg that Rennala clutches is described as a great rune in disguise. It allows her to perform true rebirth, which is magic that the Golden Order can't replicate. The fact that Radagon gave her this power and then left suggests complexity in their relationship. He gave her something incredibly valuable, then walked away. Maybe he loved her but loved the Golden Order more. Maybe he was always going to leave but wanted to give her something to remember him by. Rennala's boss fight is sad because you're essentially bullying a grieving widow. She's not a threat to the world. She's not trying to claim the Elden Ring. She's just hiding in her library, trying to cope with abandonment through obsessive magical research. You have to fight her because she has a great rune, and you need to collect them all. But the game makes it clear that this is a tragedy rather than a triumph. The students who protect her, calling her their queen and their moon, show that she still commands loyalty despite her madness. They've been subjected to her rebirth experiments, turned into something inhuman, but they still love her. This suggests that Rennala, at her peak, was a ruler worth following. The grief broke her, but it didn't erase what she was. After the fight, if you talk to Ranni, she thanks you for being gentle with her mother. She acknowledges that Rennala is trapped in the past, but deserves protection. This is one of the few moments of genuine family affection in the game. Rani has her own agenda, she's pursuing her own ending, but she still cares enough about her mother to protect her even in madness. The moon itself is important to understanding Renella's power. Moon sorceries in Elden Ring are different from regular glintstone sorceries. They're more powerful, more ancient, connected to fate and cold and the cosmos. Renala could summon the full moon during battle. Rani uses the dark moon in her ending. The moon represents an alternative source of power that predates the Erd Tree and doesn't answer to the greater will. The personal nature of endings. What makes Elden Ring's endings philosophically interesting is that they're not about saving the world in a traditional sense. They're about what you believe the world should be. There's no objectively correct choice. Every ending has costs and benefits. Every ending helps some people and hurts others. If you choose the Age of Fracture, you're restoring order and stability, but you're also perpetuating a system that discriminates against omens and persecutes the undead. If you choose the Age of Stars, you're freeing people from divine control, but you're also leaving them alone in a cold and possibly hostile universe. If you choose the Blessing of Despair, you're creating horrific equality where everyone suffers the same. If you choose the Age of Order, you're creating a perfect system that can never change or grow. The Lord of Frenzied Flame ending is the only one that's clearly bad by any moral standard, but even it has an internal logic. If you genuinely believe that existence is suffering and the only compassionate act is to end existence, then burning the world makes sense. It's nihilism taken seriously. Most people reject this philosophy, but the game lets you choose it if you want. Fear's Age of Duskborn is about accepting death and undeath as natural, which sounds progressive, but it also means accepting the death blight and the corruption spreading from Godwyn's corpse. You're legitimizing a plague in the name of inclusion. Is that compassionate or horrifying? The game doesn't tell you. The endings force you to think about what you value. Do you value order over freedom, stability over justice, individual agency over cosmic guidance? There's no ending where everyone gets what they want. You have to make trade-offs, and those trade-offs reveal your priorities. This is why players argue about which ending is best. It's not an objective question, it's a values question. Someone who values tradition and stability will see the Age of Fracture, or Age of Order, as best. Someone who values freedom and autonomy will choose the Age of Stars. Someone who's been hurt by discrimination might choose the Blessing of Despair out of spite, even though it's objectively terrible. The game also doesn't punish you for your choice. Every ending plays out. The world changes according to your decision. There's no last-minute reversal where someone tells you you were wrong. You make the choice, the ending happens, the credits roll. You live with the consequences, or at least the world you created does. This moral ambiguity is intentional. From software games, often avoid clear moral frameworks, but Elden Ring takes it further by making the final choice genuinely impactful and genuinely unclear. You're not fighting evil. You're choosing between different visions of order, and all of them have flaws. The fact that you can lock yourself into the Frenzied Flame ending and have to complete a difficult quest to undo it shows that choices have weight. The game takes your decisions seriously. If you embrace the Flame of Chaos, that's a commitment. You can back out, but it's hard and requires you to prove you're willing to fight for an alternative. Some players criticize the endings for being too similar or not different enough in their outcomes. The cutscenes are short, the changes to the world aren't shown in detail, but this is also intentional. The game is about the choice itself, not the immediate visual payoff. You're reshaping the metaphysical laws of reality. That's not something you can easily show in a 2-minute cutscene. The endings also reflect the game's themes of cycles and repetition. Every age eventually ends, every order eventually shatters. The Age of Fracture will probably lead to another shattering. The Age of Stars might last 1,000 years, but then what? The Age of Order claims to be eternal, but so did the previous order. The Frenzied Flame is the only ending that breaks the cycle by ending existence, but that's solving the problem by destroying everything. By making the endings personal rather than universal, the game is saying that there are no permanent solutions. Whatever you choose will eventually be replaced by something else. The best you can do is make a choice that aligns with your values and hope it helps more than it hurts. That's a mature and somewhat pessimistic philosophy, but it fits the world Elden Ring has built. The Melina question. Melina is one of the most mysterious characters in Elden Ring, and her true nature and motivations are deliberately kept vague. She appears at the beginning of the game and offers you an accord. She'll turn the runes you collect into strength, allowing you to level up, and in exchange you'll take her to the foot of the Erd Tree. She becomes your maiden, the guide who helps you on your journey to become Elden Lord. But Melina is not a normal maiden. She has no body. She's a spirit or projection who appears at sites of grace. She says her body was burned long ago, and she exists now only as a purpose without form. Her eye is closed, sealed shut, and she says her mother gave her a task before she was born, to deliver destined death to its rightful owner. The identity of her mother is never explicitly confirmed, but everything points to Marika. Melina quotes Marika's words at various churches throughout the world. She knows things about Marika's inner thoughts and doubts that no one else could know. She talks about being born at the foot of the Erd Tree. The most logical conclusion is that Melina is Marika's daughter, possibly a secret child created for a specific purpose. That purpose seems to be burning the Erd Tree. When you reach the Forge of the Giants and realize you need a kindling to burn the thorns blocking the Erd Tree, Melina offers herself. She says she'll burn and use her body as kindling to set the tree aflame. This is her purpose. This is what she was created to do. She's a sacrificial maiden designed to destroy the very tree that her mother served as goddess. If you let Melina burn herself, she dies in the fire, and you gain access to the Erd Tree's interior. She leaves you with final words about trusting in you to become Elden Lord. Her sacrifice is framed as noble and necessary. But if you inherited the Frenzied Flame before this point, she doesn't need to sacrifice herself, because the flame can burn the tree without her. Instead, she survives and appears after the Lord of Frenzied Flame, ending to swear vengeance on you for burning the world. This reveals something important about Melina. Her one eye opens in that scene, and it's filled with purple flame. She says she will deliver destined death to you. This suggests that Melina has power she hasn't shown, that her sealed eye contains something significant, and that her connection to death goes deeper than just being kindling. The phrase destined death keeps appearing in connection with Melina. Destined death is the power of the Rune of Death, the principle that Marika removed from the Elden Ring. Malekith guards it. The Black Knife assassins used fragments of it. Melina talks about delivering it to its rightful owner. Is she meant to kill someone specific? Is she meant to restore death to the Elden Ring? The game never answers clearly. Some players theorize that Melina is the Gloam-Eyed Queen, a figure from the lore who once controlled destined death before Malekith defeated her and took the Rune of Death. The Gloam-Eyed Queen led the Godskin Apostles, enemies you fight throughout the game who wear the skin of gods they've killed. If Melina is the Gloam-Eyed Queen reborn or reincarnated, it would explain her connection to destined death and her sealed eye that opens with purple flame. But this is speculation. What's certain is that Melina knows more than she tells you. She's guiding you toward a specific outcome, and that outcome involves burning the Erd Tree and claiming the Elden Ring. She's invested in you succeeding, but not for the reasons a normal maiden would be. She has her own agenda that aligns with yours until it doesn't. Her relationship with Torrent, the spectral steed, is also mysterious. She gives you the spirit-calling bell that summons Torrent, and she says Torrent chose you. Torrent previously had an owner who's never named but who Melina seems to have known. This connection suggests Melina has been around for longer than she implies, and has been involved in events that predate your journey. The churches where Melina shares Marika's words are significant. Each one contains a piece of Marika's philosophy, her doubts about the Golden Order, her instructions to her children. Melina recites these words as if she's channeling them or remembering them. This is how you learn that Marika told her children to struggle and become strong, that she questioned the greater will, that she planned something beyond the simple maintenance of order. If Melina is Marika's agent, then her goal is probably to finish what Marika started. Marika shattered the Elden Ring, but couldn't complete her rebellion because Radagon stopped her. Melina is the backup plan. Get a Tarnished to the Erd Tree, burn it, claim the ring, and reshape it in a way that breaks the greater will's control. From this perspective, every ending except the Frenzied Flame could be seen as advancing Marika's plan. The Frenzied Flame is the only ending Melina explicitly opposes. She warns you not to seek the flame. She begs you not to open the door to the Three Fingers. If you do it anyway, she abandons you and says you're no longer fit to be her companion. Then after you burn the world, she promises to hunt you down. This is the only time Melina shows genuine emotion and agency. She'll accept any ending except the one that destroys everything. This opposition to the Frenzied Flame might be because it's the only ending that truly breaks the cycle. The other endings reshape the Elden Ring, but keep existence going. The Frenzied Flame ends it. If Melina's purpose is connected to maintaining some form of existence or delivering death in a controlled way, then the Chaos Flame undermines everything she is. The fact that she survives the Frenzied Flame ending and gains new powers suggests she's more than just kindling. She might be an Empyrean or something close to it. She might have a great rune or access to power that she's kept hidden. Her sealed eye opening with purple flame could indicate a connection to the Glow-Eyed Queen's power or to some other aspect of death that hasn't been fully explained. Melina's sacrifice in the normal path is one of the most emotionally resonant moments in the game. She's been with you from the beginning. She's turned your runes into strength. She's guided you and trusted you. And then she burns herself alive to help you reach your goal. The game doesn't force you to care about her, but if you've been paying attention to her dialogue and her story, the sacrifice hits hard. But her survival in the Frenzied Flame path and her promise of vengeance adds complexity. She's not just a passive helper. She's an active participant with her own goals. She'll die for you if you're advancing the plan, but she'll turn against you if you betray it. This makes her one of the more dynamic NPCs in a game full of characters who mostly accept their fates. The unanswered questions about Melina are frustrating, but also appropriate. She's a mystery wrapped in another mystery. Her connection to Marika, her purpose with destined death, her relationship to Torrent's former owner, her possible identity as the Glow-Eyed Queen, all of it is hinted at, but never confirmed. You're left to piece together fragments and make your own interpretation. What's clear is that Melina is central to the story in a way that's easy to overlook. She's not just a game mechanic for leveling up. She's a character with agency and purpose who's using you as much as you're using her. Whether she's a tragic sacrifice or a manipulator depends on how you read her actions and what ending you choose. Godric the Grafted. Godric is the first major demigod boss most players encounter, and he's explicitly described as the weakest and most pathetic of Marika's offspring. He's not actually Marika's direct child. He's a distant descendant, so far removed from the main bloodline that he barely counts as royalty. But he has a great rune because he managed to grab one during the chaos of the Shattering. His inferiority complex drives everything he does. He grafts the body parts of dead warriors onto himself to become stronger. Arms, legs, heads, he attaches them all in grotesque configurations. By the time you fight him, he's a shambling mass of stolen flesh, held together by desperation and ambition. In his second phase, he cuts off his own arm and grafts a dragon head onto the stump so he can breathe fire. The grafting is portrayed as pathetic rather than powerful. Other demigods earned their strength through training or divine blessing or cursed power. Godric just steals it from corpses. He's trying to fake his way into being worthy of the Elden Lord title. The game even has NPCs mock him. Kenneth Haight calls him a jumped-up country bumpkin. Gostock, the gatekeeper, talks about how Godric is a coward who hides behind his soldiers. During the War of the Shattering, Godric fled from Melinia's army and disguised himself as a woman to escape. He ran from battle and hid. This detail is mentioned in item descriptions almost as a joke. The game wants you to know that Godric, despite being a demigod with a great rune, is fundamentally a coward and a fraud. But there's something sad about Godric too. He was born into a world where power determines worth, and he didn't have any. He wasn't blessed like Millennia, or brilliant like Miquella, or strong like Radahn. He was just a minor descendant, trying to survive in a family of gods and monsters. Grafting was his way of trying to matter, of trying to become something more than the runt everyone dismissed. His boss fight reflects his nature. He's aggressive and dangerous, but his attacks are clumsy and desperate. He throws everything at you, including grafted soldiers and a dragon head that doesn't fit properly with his body. He screams about his lineage and his right to rule. He's performing strength because he doesn't have real confidence. When you kill him, you get his great rune, which boosts all your attributes. This is fitting because Godric's whole thing is trying to boost himself artificially. His rune is the most generically powerful, raising every stat, because he didn't specialize in anything. He just wanted more of everything. The people of Limgrave seem relieved when Godric dies. He was a tyrant who forced his soldiers to graft body parts and conscripted anyone he could capture. Kenneth Haight's questline involves trying to find a proper ruler for Limgrave now that Godric is gone. Nephew Nefeli Lux is suggested as a candidate because she has warrior's blood and honor, everything Godric lacked. Godric's legacy is almost nothing. He's a footnote. The other demigods have grand plans and tragic stories. Godric just wanted to be strong and failed at even that. His grafting produced a monstrosity rather than a champion. He fled from battle and died in his own castle to a Tarnished he thought he could crush. There's a parallel between Godric and the Tarnished. Both are trying to claim power they weren't born with. Both are outsiders to the divine bloodline. The difference is that the Tarnished earn their strength through genuine struggle, while Godric tried to steal it. The game rewards effort and punishes shortcuts. The soldiers who serve Godric are victims. They're forced to participate in grafting rituals. Some have extra arms or mismatched limbs. They fight you because they have no choice. When you kill Godric, you're freeing them from a ruler who treated them as raw materials for his own enhancement. Stormvale Castle, where Godric rules, is filled with evidence of his grafting obsession. There are rooms full of body parts. There are grafted scions, creatures made from dozens of bodies mashed together. There are paintings that show Godric in idealized form, trying to present himself as a legitimate lord. The castle is a monument to insecurity. The fact that Godric is the first major boss means new players might think all the demigods are like him, weak, pathetic, easily defeated. Then you meet the others and realize Godric was the exception. He was the tutorial boss for fighting demigods. The real challenges come later, but even as the weakest demigod, Godric serves a purpose in the narrative. He shows what happens when someone with no real power or vision tries to claim the Elden Ring. He's a cautionary tale about ambition without ability. He's what you could become if you just tried to take shortcuts instead of genuinely growing stronger. Rykard and the Manor. Rykard is one of the strangest demigods, and his ending is unique because you can't actually choose it. He fed himself to a god-devouring serpent and merged with it, becoming a massive snake-human hybrid that lives in a lake of lava under Mount Gelmir. His plan is to devour all the gods and grow strong enough to consume the world itself. Before he became a serpent, Rykard was the lord of Volcano Manor and the brother of Ranni and Radahn. He was a pragmatist who rejected the Golden Order, not out of philosophy but out of practicality. He saw that the Order was failing and decided to pursue power through any means necessary. The serpent offered that power, so he took it. The god-devouring serpent was an ancient entity that existed before the Erd Tree. It's described as a primal force of hunger and consumption. Rykard discovered it and made a deal. He fed himself to the serpent, and in return the serpent's power became his. Now he exists as a grotesque fusion, a human torso and head emerging from a giant snake body, wielding a blade forged from the serpent's remains. Volcano Manor operates as a cult dedicated to hunting Tarnished, who are trying to become Elden Lord. The members of the manor believe that the path to Elden Lord is a trap set by the Greater Will, and they want to devour anyone who follows it. When you join the manor, you're given assassination contracts to kill other Tarnished. This is Rykard's philosophy in action. Consume your rivals, grow stronger through predation. Tanith, Rykard's consort, runs the manor in his absence. She's completely devoted to him even after he transformed into a monster. She sees beauty in his serpent form. She feeds him champions and believes that he'll eventually devour the gods and remake the world. Her loyalty is absolute and disturbing. When you fight Rykard, the game gives you a special weapon called the Serpent Hunter, a massive spear designed specifically to kill the serpent. Without this weapon, the fight is nearly impossible. With it, you can damage him properly. This is the game telling you that some enemies can only be defeated with the right tools, not just raw strength. Rykard's dialogue during the fight is iconic. He talks about devouring the gods together, family. He offers you a place in his digesting stomach where you can join the serpent and become part of something greater. He's insane, but also weirdly sincere. He genuinely believes that consumption and amalgamation are the path to power and that everyone should join him in this grotesque unity. When you kill him, Tanith refuses to accept it. She stays in the boss room and begins eating his corpse. If you return later, you can find her still consuming him, trying to become one with him even in death. This is devotion taken to a horrifying extreme. She'd rather be consumed by him than live without him. Rykard's great rune restores health when you kill enemies, which perfectly reflects his philosophy. He gains strength through consumption. Every kill feeds him. This is the opposite of the Golden Order's philosophy, where strength comes from grace and divine blessing. Rykard's strength comes from eating his enemies. The recusants, which is what the Volcano Manor members call themselves, represent rejection of destiny. They refuse to play the game the greater will set up. They won't try to become Elden Lord through the proper channels. Instead, they'll kill everyone who tries and consume their strength. It's a philosophy of cosmic rebellion through predation. But Rykard's plan was always doomed. You can't devour the gods, because the gods aren't physical beings you can eat. They're cosmic forces. The serpent might consume flesh and runes, but it can't consume the greater will, or the formless mother, or the frenzied flame. Rykard's ambition exceeded what was physically possible, and he turned himself into a monster for nothing. There's also the question of what happens to the people the serpent devours. Are they digested and destroyed, or do they become part of the serpent like Rykard did? The walls of the serpent's chamber are lined with corpses in various states of digestion. Some still have faces, some are just bones. The implication is that most people don't survive the consumption. Only Rykard was strong enough to merge rather than be destroyed. The Volcano Manor questline is one of the darker paths in the game. You're actively killing other Tarnished who are trying to do the same thing you are. You're helping a cult of cannibalistic zealots feed champions to a serpent god. But the rewards are good, and the game doesn't judge you for it. You can complete the questline and still choose any ending. Your actions in the manor don't lock you into anything. Rykard's relationship with his siblings is interesting. Ranni clearly doesn't approve of what he became, but she doesn't stop him either. Radahn fought him at some point, suggested by the fact that Radahn learned gravitational magic partially to avoid being consumed. The family dynamics of the demigods are complicated, full of alliances and betrayals. The serpent itself has lore that predates the Golden Order. There are references to serpents being enemies of the Erd Tree, ancient beings that represented a different form of power. By merging with the serpent, Rykard was tapping into something older than the gods, a primal force of hunger that existed before order was imposed on the world. Rykard represents the path of pure consumption and growth, without limits or morality. He's what happens when ambition becomes completely untethered from any ethical framework. He'll eat anything, anyone, even himself, if it makes him stronger. The game presents this as monstrous, but it's also seductive. The promise of infinite growth through consumption appeals to something dark in human nature. When you take his great rune after killing him, you're literally consuming his power. You're doing exactly what he wanted everyone to do. The irony is that by defeating him, you're proving his philosophy works. The strong consume the weak. You were stronger, so you consumed him. The grace and the guidance. Grace is the golden light that marks sites where you can rest and level up. But it's also a metaphysical concept that defines who belongs in the Golden Order and who doesn't. People who have grace are blessed by the Erd Tree. People without it are exiles. The Tarnished lost grace when they were exiled, and then had it mysteriously restored when Marika called them back. The guidance of grace is the golden light that points you toward your next objective. It shows you which direction to go, which boss to fight, which path will lead you toward becoming Elden Lord. But not everyone can see it. Some Tarnished have grace but can't see the guidance. Others, like Gideon, can see it but interpret it differently. This raises questions about free will and destiny. Are you following grace because you choose to, or are you being manipulated by Marika or the greater will to fulfill a predetermined role. The game suggests that grace is a tool of control, a way for the Erd Tree to guide people toward outcomes that benefit the Order. But grace is also unreliable. It points you toward the Erd Tree, but it doesn't tell you what to do when you get there. It doesn't tell you which ending to choose. It guides you to the point of decision and then leaves you alone to decide. This suggests that grace isn't about controlling your final choice, just about getting you to the place where the choice matters. Some NPCs talk about losing grace or never having it. Vare mocks you for being maidenless and following grace like a lost puppy. The recusants at Volcano Manor reject grace entirely and kill those who follow it. The implication is that grace is something you can choose to reject, that it's not absolute control. Melina's role as the one who can see grace when you rest at sites is interesting. She's your interpreter of grace, turning the golden light into tangible strength through leveling up. Without her, you could still see grace, but you couldn't use it properly. This makes her a mediator between you and the Erd Tree's power. The fact that Melina can be replaced by the Three Fingers if you inherit the Frenzied Flame shows that grace isn't the only source of power. The Chaos Flame offers an alternative system. You can level up using Melina's grace, or you can use the Flame's madness. The mechanics are the same, but the source is different. This suggests that multiple outer gods can provide similar services to those who serve them. Sites of grace are physical locations, usually marked by the roots of the Erd Tree or significant story moments. They're not random. Each one represents a place where the Erd Tree's influence is strong enough to create a sanctuary. When you rest at a site of grace, you're literally being sheltered by the tree's power. But grace doesn't protect everyone equally. Enemies respawn when you rest, which means grace only benefits you, not the world around you. It's a selfish power that restores the chosen individual while resetting everyone else to their default state. This could be seen as another example of the Golden Order's hierarchy. Grace elevates the chosen and ignores everyone else. The Tarnished who can't see guidance are at a disadvantage. They have grace, they've been called back, but they don't know where to go or what to do. Some of them just wander, some give up, some find other purposes. You're unique because you can see the guidance clearly, which means you're specifically chosen for this task. This selection raises the question of who's doing the choosing. Is it Marika? Is it the greater will? Is it the Erd Tree itself? The game never clarifies, which leaves open the possibility that multiple forces are trying to guide you toward different outcomes, and you're just seeing the strongest signal. The golden eyes that Tarnished have when they possess grace are a physical mark of their chosen status, but the eyes can be changed. If you inherit the Frenzied Flame, your eyes turn yellow with fire. If you follow certain questlines, NPCs' eyes change to reflect their allegiances. Eyes are windows to which outer god you serve. Grace also functions as a checkpoint system, which is a meta-acknowledgement that this is a video game. But the lore justification is that grace literally resurrects you when you die. You're brought back at the last site of grace you touched. This means death isn't permanent for you, which makes you fundamentally different from everyone else in the world. You can fail infinitely and keep trying. That's a massive advantage. This resurrection through grace is why some NPCs view the Tarnished with suspicion or hope. You're unkillable, you'll keep coming back until you succeed or give up. That makes you either the most dangerous thing in the world or the perfect tool for someone's agenda. The sites of grace that appear after you defeat major bosses are interesting because they represent the Erd Tree acknowledging your progress. You've overcome a significant obstacle, so the tree gives you a new resting point. It's almost like the tree is rewarding you for advancing toward the goal of becoming Elden Lord. But if you choose the Frenzied Flame ending, you're using grace to reach a position where you can destroy the Erd Tree. You're being empowered by the very thing you're going to burn. That's either irony or strategy, depending on whether the tree knows what you're planning. The relationship between grace and the Rune of Death is also significant. Death was removed from the Elden Ring, which created the undead and broke the natural cycle. But Tarnished with grace can die and be resurrected infinitely. This suggests that grace provides a form of controlled immortality that's different from the broken immortality of those who live in death. One is a blessing, the other is a curse, but both involve transcending normal death. Roundtable Hold. The Roundtable Hold is the hub area where you meet other Tarnished upgrade weapons, and advance NPC questlines. But it's also a place with its own mysteries and dark history. It exists in a separate space from the physical world, accessible only through grace. You can't walk there, you have to be transported. The first time you rest at a site of grace in Limgrave, Melina tells you about the Round Table Hold and takes you there. She says it's a place where Tarnished gather, guided by grace, to pursue their goals. It's described as a sanctuary, but it doesn't feel entirely safe. The people there are competitors as much as allies. The architecture of the Round Table Hold mirrors Lanedel's fortified manor, which you can visit in the actual capital city. The two locations are identical in layout, but the Round Table Hold exists outside normal space. Some lore suggests it's a memory or projection of the original manor, sustained by grace or some other power. Others think it's a pocket dimension, created specifically for the Tarnished. The people you meet in the Round Table Hold are some of the most important NPCs in the game. Gideon Ofnir, who's researching the demigods and trying to learn everything about the Elden Ring. Hugh, the blacksmith who's been enslaved and forced to forge a weapon that can kill a god. Roderica, the spirit tuner who can enhance your summons. Fia, the deathbed companion. Dee, hunter of the dead. Brother Corhin, teacher of Golden Order incantations. Each has their own agenda. Hugh's story is one of the saddest in the game. He's chained to the anvil, literally unable to leave. He was enslaved by Marika and given a single task: forge a weapon capable of killing a god. He doesn't know why. He doesn't know which god. He just hammers away at his forge, improving your weapons, hoping that one of them will be the god-slaying blade Marika demanded. When you progress far enough in the game, Hugh starts to lose his memory. He forgets who you are, forgets his purpose, but keeps smithing. Even when the Round Table Hold starts burning after you claim the Elden Ring, Hugh stays at his anvil. He can't leave. He's bound there by Marika's command. He smiths until the end, fulfilling his purpose even as he forgets why it matters. Roderica's questline involves her overcoming fear and finding purpose. She arrives at the Round Table Hold, terrified and traumatized from seeing her companions turned into grafted abominations by Godric. She thinks she's worthless and can't do anything. Hugh recognizes that she has talent as a spirit tuner and encourages her. Eventually, she finds her confidence and sets up shop, helping you enhance your spirit summons. The relationship between Hugh and Roderica is one of the few genuinely kind relationships in the game. They support each other. Hugh encourages Roderica to find her strength. Roderica stays with Hugh even when the hold burns, refusing to leave him alone. They're both trapped by their purposes, but they find comfort in each other's company. The two fingers in the Round Table Hold serve as your connection to the greater will. You can talk to them, and Enya, the finger reader, translates their slow, ponderous communications. The fingers guide you toward becoming Elden Lord, but their guidance becomes increasingly useless as the game progresses. Eventually, they stop responding entirely, stuck in communion with the greater will, trying to get new instructions that never come. This breakdown in communication shows that the greater will has either abandoned the lands between, or is so distant that its instructions take thousands of years to arrive. Either way, the fingers can't help you when you need them most. You're on your own to decide what to do with the Elden Ring once you claim it. Gideon Ofnir presents himself as an ally, but he's ultimately an enemy. He's been researching the demigods to find their weaknesses, and he shares information with you. But when you get close to claiming the Elden Ring, he attacks you. He says that Marika wants the Tarnished to struggle forever, to fight eternally without ever succeeding. He's decided that the correct response is to stop you from becoming Elden Lord. But Gideon is also a hypocrite. He calls himself the All-Knowing, but admits he doesn't know everything. He's been manipulating other Tarnished, sending them on quests that get them killed so he can gather information from their failures. He's not a scholar seeking truth. He's a schemer trying to game the system. When you beat him, he dies rambling about how much he learned, as if knowledge mattered more than living. Fia's presence in the Round Table Hold is controversial, because she's helping those who live in death, which is heretical. Dee hunts the undead and hates Fia once he learns what she's doing. The tension between them leads to murder. Fia kills Dee to protect herself and her mission. This shows that the Round Table Hold isn't really a sanctuary. It's a pressure cooker of competing agendas, waiting to explode. The hold itself starts deteriorating after you set the Erd Tree on fire. The building burns, NPCs leave or die or go mad. By the end of the game, the Round Table Hold is almost empty. Just Hugh at his forge, and maybe Roderica keeping him company. The sanctuary that brought Tarnished together collapses once someone actually gets close to becoming Elden Lord. This decay mirrors the decay of the Golden Order itself. The Round Table Hold was sustained by grace and the promise of becoming Elden Lord. Once that promise is about to be fulfilled, the hold loses its purpose and falls apart. It was never meant to be permanent. It was a waiting room for people pursuing an impossible goal. The merchants in the hold sell useful items, but they also have their own tragic backstory. Merchants throughout the lands between were persecuted by the Golden Order and buried alive beneath Lane Dell. The ones you meet survived, or avoided the purge, but they remember. Some of their dialogue hints at bitterness toward the Order and sympathy for outcasts and exiles. The painting you can find in the Round Table Hold shows a young girl in a frozen landscape. If you find this location in the game world and investigate, you meet Ranni's doll and progress her questline. This connection suggests the Round Table Hold has links to various storylines and secrets that aren't obvious on a first playthrough. The merchant Gostock, who you can meet at Stormvale Castle before reaching the Round Table Hold, eventually moves there after Godric dies. He opens a shop and acts friendly, but he's been stealing runes from you every time you died in Stormvale. You can kill him for this betrayal or let him live. The game doesn't judge either choice. He's a thief, but he's also a survivor trying to make his way in a broken world. The Round Table Hold represents community among the Tarnished, but it's a dysfunctional community built on competition and mistrust. Everyone wants to become Elden Lord. Only one person can. That means everyone else is an obstacle. The facade of cooperation barely hides the reality that you're all rivals fighting for the same prize. When the hold burns and everyone leaves or dies, you're left alone with the realization that the community was temporary and conditional. It existed only as long as the goal remained distant. Once someone actually reached the Erd Tree and claimed the ring, the pretense of fellowship collapsed. Malekith and destined death. Malekith is Marika's shadow, a beast bonded to serve and protect her. His primary duty was to guard the Rune of Death after Marika removed it from the Elden Ring. This rune represents destined death, the principle that all things must eventually end. By removing it, Marika created a world where her chosen people couldn't truly die, but she also created imbalance and corruption. Malekith guarded the rune faithfully until the Night of Black Knives, when someone stole a fragment of it and used it to create the weapons that killed Godwyn. This theft was Malekith's greatest failure. He was supposed to prevent exactly this, and he failed. The guilt consumed him. When you meet Malekith in Farum Azula, he's hiding his identity. He appears first as Geraint, beast clergyman, a creature who hungers for Deathroot. Deathroot is the corruption that spreads from those who live in death, and Geraint consumes it, trying to contain the spread of death blight. If you feed him enough Deathroot, he becomes less aggressive and more coherent, suggesting that the corruption drives him mad. But when you reach Farum Azula and confront him in the proper boss arena, his identity is revealed. Geraint and Malekith are the same being. He's been trying to atone for his failure by consuming the symptoms of the problem he helped create. The death that leaked out after the Night of Black Knives is spreading as blight, and Malekith is desperately trying to eat it all back. The fight against Malekith is one of the most challenging in the game. He's fast, aggressive, and his attacks drain your maximum HP. He wields the Rune of Death directly, which means his strikes can kill anything, even gods. This is the weapon that can permanently end immortal beings. When he hits you, you feel death's touch in a way that normal damage doesn't convey. His dialogue during the fight reveals his desperation. He calls you a trespasser and says you'll never take the Rune of Death. He's terrified that he'll fail again, that another fragment will be stolen and used to cause more destruction. He's fighting not out of loyalty to the Golden Order, but out of personal terror that his second failure will be even worse than the first. When you defeat Malekith and claim the Rune of Death, You're fundamentally changing the rules of the world. Death is now unbound. Marika's seal is broken. The Elden Beast, which is immortal, becomes vulnerable. This is why defeating Maliketh is required to progress. You need the power to kill a god, and the Rune of Death is the only thing that can do it. The Rune of Death in the Elden Ring isn't evil, it's natural. Death is supposed to be part of the cycle. Living things are born, they grow, they die, they return to the earth, and new life emerges. By removing death, Marika broke this cycle. She created immortal demigods who went insane from never dying. She created undead who couldn't rest. She turned death from a transition into a curse. Maliketh's loyalty to Marika, despite her removing him from the Elden Ring and using him as a guard, is touching and tragic. He serves her without question, even though his job is to prevent anyone from restoring the natural order she disrupted. He's a tool being used to perpetuate an imbalance, and he knows it, but he serves anyway because that's what shadows do. The Black Blade incantations you can learn from Maliketh's remembrance describe death as black and hungry. The Rune of Death isn't peaceful sleep, it's annihilation, the complete end of existence. When something is killed with destined death, it doesn't go to the Erd Tree to be reborn. It's just gone. This permanence is why Marika feared it and why she locked it away. But permanence is also what makes death meaningful. If everything is recyclable and nothing truly ends, then nothing truly matters. Actions have no final consequences. Lives have no ultimate conclusion. The Rune of Death restores stakes to existence. It makes endings possible, which paradoxically makes beginnings meaningful. Maliketh's relationship with the gloam-eyed queen, who previously wielded destined death, is hinted at but never explained. He defeated her and took the Rune of Death from her, presumably on Marika's orders. This makes him not just a guardian, but a conqueror. He didn't just receive the rune, he fought for it and won. The Godskin Apostles, who served the gloam-eyed queen, are enemies you fight throughout the game. They wear the skin of gods they've killed, and they use black flame incantations that are connected to destined death. Their existence proves that before Maliketh took the rune, there was a faction that used death as a weapon against the gods. Maliketh stopping them and claiming the rune was part of establishing the Golden Order's dominance. By controlling death, Marika controlled who could and couldn't be killed. This gave her absolute power over life and made her position unassailable, until she shattered the ring and threw everything into chaos anyway. The beast clergyman persona that Maliketh adopts shows his fractured mental state. He's literally hiding from himself, trying to be someone else, someone who didn't fail. Geraint is what Maliketh wants to be, a simple servant doing a simple job without the weight of cosmic responsibility. But he can't escape who he is. When you use the Rune of Death to kill the Elden Beast, you're using the very power that was removed from the Elden Ring to destroy the being that guards the ring. It's poetic justice in a way. The tool Marika created to protect her order becomes the weapon that ends it. The restoration of destined death also affects the endings. In the Age of Fracture, death is presumably still part of the Elden Ring, since you had to claim the Rune of Death to get there. In Fear's ending, death becomes explicitly integrated as a natural part of the cycle. In the Age of Order, death might be controlled again, but in a different way. The Rune of Death is the most impactful piece of the Elden Ring, because it determines whether endings are permanent or temporary. Maliketh's armor and weapons describe him as having unparalleled strength and loyalty. He was Marika's most trusted servant, her literal shadow, a being created to protect her. But she used him to guard something she was afraid of, rather than keeping him close. She sent him to Fara Mazula, a place outside time, to wait forever with a rune that represented her greatest fear. That's not trust. That's exile with extra steps. The fact that Maliketh went mad from guilt and started eating deathroot shows that even the most loyal servants have breaking points. He couldn't handle the weight of his failure. He became obsessed with fixing it, consuming the corruption piece by piece. But there was too much. The death that leaked out from Godwyn's corpse spread faster than he could eat it. His task was impossible, but he kept trying because he had nothing else. When you kill Maliketh, you're not just defeating a boss, you're ending his suffering. He's been trapped in a cycle of guilt and consumption, trying to fix an unfixable problem. Death releases him from that purpose. There's no resurrection for shadows. When they die, they're gone. Maliketh's death is final, which is fitting for the guardian of destined death. The remembrance of the black blade that you get from Maliketh can be traded for his weapons or incantations. These tools let you wield a fraction of destined death's power. The black blade incantation reduces maximum HP and continues to drain health over time. Its death is a gradual process, not an instant end. This reflects the way death was spreading through the lands between after the Night of Black Knives. Slow, inevitable, corrupting. The connection between Maliketh and Blade, Ranni's shadow, is important for understanding what shadows are. Blade is bound to Ranni the same way Maliketh was bound to Marika. Shadows are created by the two fingers to keep Empyreans in line. If an Empyrean rebels against the greater will, their shadow is supposed to go mad and kill them. This happened to Blade when Ranni pursued her ending. It might have happened to Maliketh if Marika had lived long enough to complete her rebellion. Shadows are insurance policies. They're loyal servants who become assassins if their masters step out of line. Marika knew this, which is why she might have sent Maliketh away before she shattered the ring. If he'd been there when she did it, he might have been forced to kill her. By sending him to guard the Rune of Death in a place outside time, she protected him from being used against her. But this is speculation. The game never confirms Marika's motivations for exiling Maliketh. Maybe she just needed the Rune of Death guarded, and Farum Azula was the safest place. Maybe she was protecting him. Maybe she was getting rid of a potential threat. The ambiguity is intentional. What's clear is that Maliketh's story is about the cost of loyalty. He served Marika perfectly, did everything she asked, and his reward was isolation, guilt, and madness. He guarded the most dangerous rune in existence and failed once, which broke him completely. Even when you give him Deathroot and help him, he doesn't find peace. He just keeps consuming, keeps trying to fix his mistake, until you kill him. The Rune of Death is now part of whatever Elden Ring you create. Death is back in the cycle. This changes everything about how the world works. The immortality that demigods enjoyed is gone. The undead who couldn't die properly might finally be able to rest. Or death might become even more corrupted and twisted, depending on which ending you choose. The rune doesn't come with instructions. It's just a tool, and like any tool, it can be used in different ways. Radahn and the Stars. Radahn is probably the most beloved demigod among the community, despite being completely insane by the time you fight him. He's described as the mightiest hero of the demigods, a warrior so strong that he learned gravitational magic just so he could keep riding his beloved horse Leonard, even as his body grew to massive size. That detail alone tells you everything about his character. He learned reality-bending magic for the sake of his horse. Before he went mad, Radahn was a general who led armies and idolized Godfrey, the first Elden Lord. He wanted to be like Godfrey, a warrior king who earned his position through strength and honor. During the Shattering, Radahn controlled Caelid and held the Redmane Castle. He was considered one of the strongest demigods, possibly the strongest after Malenia. Then Malenia came to Caelid and challenged him. The battle between them is legendary in the lore. They were perfectly matched. Neither could gain an advantage. The fight would have ended in a stalemate, but Malenia did something desperate. She unleashed the goddess of rot, her curse in full bloom, and turned Caelid into a plague-ridden hellscape. The scarlet rot consumed Radahn's mind. It didn't kill him, because demigods don't die easily, but it destroyed his sanity. He became a mindless beast, wandering the desert, eating the corpses of his own soldiers. His legendary gravity magic kept him from collapsing, but it also kept him trapped in his degraded state. His armor rotted away, his horse somehow stayed with him, and he kept holding the stars in place, even though he no longer understood why. The reason Radahn was holding the stars is connected to Ranni's fate. When the stars move, they influence destiny in the lands between. Ranni's fate was tied to a star, and as long as Radahn kept the stars frozen, her fate couldn't progress. He might have been doing this intentionally before he went mad, possibly at the request of the Golden Order or the Two Fingers who wanted to prevent Ranni from achieving her goals. The Radahn Festival is a celebration where warriors from across the lands between gather to give Radahn an honorable death. He's been suffering for years, eating corpses, driven mad by rot. The festival is a mercy killing disguised as a tournament. You fight him alongside other champions, and together you put him down. The fight itself is spectacular. Radahn uses gravity magic to pull meteors from the sky. He fires arrows the size of spears. He charges across the battlefield on Leonard, who somehow survives carrying a giant rotting demigod. In his second phase, he leaps into the sky and crashes down like a meteor himself. It's one of the most visually impressive fights in the game. When you kill him, the stars start moving again. A star falls from the sky and crashes into Limgrave, creating a crater that leads to Nokron, the underground eternal city. This is how you access the area needed to progress Ranni's questline. Radahn's death literally unlocks the path to one of the game's endings. His final contribution is opening the way for someone else's plan. There's tragedy in Radahn's fate. He was a hero, a general, a warrior who inspired loyalty. His soldiers loved him so much that they voluntarily infected themselves with scarlet rot so they could continue to honor him in death. They gather every year for the festival to celebrate his legend. But the man they're honoring is gone. What remains is a rotting husk that eats corpses and has forgotten everything it once was. The relationship between Radahn and Malenia is complex. Some lore suggests they might have been friends, or at least respectful rivals before the war. The battle was supposed to be a test of strength between the two mightiest demigods, but Malenia's curse changed the nature of the fight. She couldn't afford to lose because she was fighting for Miquella's dream, so she did the unthinkable and embraced the rot. Malenia claims she's never known defeat, which is technically true. The fight with Radahn ended in a draw. She collapsed from exhaustion and was carried away by her knight. Radahn was left standing, but mindless. Neither won. Both lost. But Malenia gets to claim she was undefeated because she survived and stayed herself while Radahn lost his mind. The scarlet rot that consumed Caelid is a permanent scar on the world. The region is uninhabitable. The animals have mutated into grotesque forms. The landscape is red and diseased. This is the cost of Malenia's desperation. She won the battle in the sense that she didn't lose, but thousands died from the rot she unleashed. The game doesn't let her off the hook for this. The environmental storytelling makes it clear that her action was catastrophic. Radahn's gravitational magic is interesting because it's learned magic, not divine power. He studied at the Academy of Raya Lucaria, possibly during the time when his father Radagon was married to Renala. He learned the principles of gravity and stars, and used them to enhance his combat abilities. This makes him different from demigods like Malenia, who were born with their powers. The fact that he holds the stars, even after going mad, suggests that his magic is tied to his will in a fundamental way. He wants to hold the stars, so he does, even when he can't remember why. It's become an instinct, a reflex. His mind is gone, but his purpose remains, encoded in the magic itself. Leonard, his tiny horse, is the most beloved character in the entire game despite having no dialogue or questline. The image of this massive rotting demigod, riding a regular-sized horse that he refuses to abandon, is both absurd and touching. Radahn could have let Leonard go. He could have accepted that he was too big to ride anymore, but he learned gravity magic instead. That's devotion. When you use Radahn's Great Rune, it boosts your health, stamina, and equipment load. These are the stats of a warrior who fights in heavy armor and never backs down. Radahn's power is about endurance and strength, taking hits and dealing them back. It's a straightforward rune with no tricks or gimmicks, which fits his character. The Redmane Knights who serve Radahn are some of the most honorable NPCs in the game. They organize the festival. They speak about Radahn with reverence. They want to give him a warrior's death, because that's what he deserves. After you kill him, they continue to honor his memory. They're loyal to a corpse, which should be pathetic, but the game frames it as noble. Jeren, the announcer of the festival, has a questline that reveals more about Radahn's followers. Jeren was a guest of the Carrion royal family and knew Radahn before the rot. He's been organizing the festival for years, waiting for someone strong enough to give Radahn the death he deserves. When you do it, Jeren thanks you sincerely. He sees it as a service, not a murder. The symbolism of Radahn holding back the stars connects to the broader theme of resisting fate. The stars represent destiny and change, By holding them in place, Radahn is freezing fate, preventing the future from arriving. This is what the Golden Order wants, a static world where nothing changes. But it's also unnatural and requires constant effort. The moment Radahn dies, the stars move and fate resumes. Ranni's plan required Radahn to die, which means she might have known that Malenia would fight him. She might have even encouraged it. The timing is suspicious. The Night of Black Knives happened when Ranni killed herself. The war between Radahn and Malenia happened during the Shattering. Ranni benefits from both events. She's either incredibly lucky or incredibly manipulative. When the star falls and opens the path to Nokron, you're literally descending into the past. The Eternal Cities were buried underground as punishment. Accessing them requires breaking Radahn's spell. The stars, death, fate, and history are all connected. Radahn was holding back more than just celestial bodies. He was holding back the progression of Ranni's entire plan. His death is the moment when her ending becomes possible. Everything before that was preparation. Everything after is execution. Radahn the hero, the general, the warrior, becomes Radahn the obstacle that had to be removed. His legendary strength and determination weren't enough. The rot took him, and his death served someone else's purpose. But at least he got an honorable death. He went down fighting, surrounded by warriors who respected him, in a festival celebrating his legend. For a warrior like Radahn, that's probably the best ending he could have hoped for, given what the rot had done to him. The Haligtree and Miquella's dream. The Haligtree is Miquella's attempt to create an alternative to the Erd Tree, a sanctuary for those rejected by the Golden Order. It's hidden in a secret area that requires solving a puzzle and finding medallion halves to access. When you finally reach it, you find a massive golden tree that looks like it should be thriving, but is rotting from within. Miquella's vision was pure. He wanted a place where omens, Albinaurics, misbegotten, and all the cursed and rejected people could live without persecution. The Haligtree was supposed to be free from the influence of outer gods. It would grow on its own power, fed by Miquella's unalloyed gold, which is gold purified of outside influence. He watered the tree with his own blood. He embedded himself in the tree's roots, trying to use his own life force to make it grow. He created a needle that could ward off the influence of outer gods. He gathered followers who believed in his dream. The infrastructure was there. The intention was good, but it failed. The first sign that something is wrong is the rot. Scarlet rot has infected parts of the Haligtree. This is Malenia's curse, spreading through the very sanctuary that was supposed to be free from such things. Miquella's needle could suppress the rot in Malenia's body, but it couldn't eliminate it. And when Malenia became the goddess of rot in her fight with Radahn, the curse became too strong to contain. The second sign is Miquella's absence. When you reach the core of the Haligtree where he should be cocooned and growing, you find the cocoon empty. An arm reaches out from it, withered and dead. Mog kidnapped Miquella before the transformation could complete. The plan to cure his eternal childhood by embedding himself in the tree and growing into an adult failed because he was stolen. The people who came to the Haligtree seeking refuge are suffering. The Albina Rooks, who are artificial life forms rejected by the Golden Order, made a pilgrimage to the tree hoping for acceptance. Many died on the journey. The ones who made it found a rotting sanctuary and no savior to protect them. They're still there, waiting for Miquella to wake up, not knowing he's gone. Loretta, one of the boss fights in the Haligtree, was a knight who led the Albinaurics to the tree. She believed in Miquella's promise of safety. She guards the approach to the tree, even though Miquella isn't there anymore. She's another example of loyalty persisting past the point of reason. The person she's serving is absent, but she keeps serving anyway. The Clean Rot Knights who serve Malenia are infected with scarlet rot, but continue to fight. They chose to be infected so they could stay with Malenia even as her curse spread. This is devotion taken to an extreme. They're rotting alive, slowly dying, but they won't abandon their commander. They protect the path to her, even though the dream they were fighting for is dead. Malenia herself waits at the roots of the Haligtree, guarding the empty cocoon. She doesn't know Miquella is gone. She's been in a coma or trance since the battle with Radahn, and when she woke, she just returned to her post. She's waiting for Miquella to emerge from the cocoon and fulfill his promise to cure her, but he never will. The cocoon is empty, her vigil is pointless. The boss fight with Melania is famously difficult, considered by many to be the hardest fight in the game. She's fast, aggressive, and has a healing mechanic that restores her health whenever she hits you. In her second phase, she becomes the goddess of rot, sprouting wings and gaining new attacks. The fight is brutal because Melania is desperate. She's the blade of Miquella, and without him, she has no purpose. Fighting you is the only thing she has left. Her dialogue when she transforms is chilling. She says she's never known defeat, and that she'll now know true horror. She's accepting the curse fully, becoming the thing she's fought against her whole life, because it's the only way to protect what remains of Miquella's dream. She's sacrificing herself to the rot for a brother who isn't even there. When you defeat her, you get her great rune and her remembrance. The rune boosts your health after defeating enemies, similar to Rykard's but less dramatic. It's about persistence through combat, which fits her character. She's kept herself alive and fighting through countless battles despite a curse that should have killed her. The remembrance can be traded for her katana or her incantation. The katana is called the Hand of Melania, and it's one of the longest reach weapons in the game. The incantation is called Scarlet Aeonia, and it summons a massive rot flower. Both reflect her dual nature. She's a graceful warrior and a plague goddess. She's a protector and a weapon of mass destruction. Miquella's unalloyed gold is found in various items throughout the game. Gold needles made from it can be used to suppress outer god influence. The needle you use to cure the Frenzied Flame is made from Miquella's gold. This proves his philosophy was correct. It is possible to resist outer gods through craft and will, but creating the tools to do it requires resources and knowledge that most people don't have. The Halig tree represents the best-case scenario for rebellion against the Golden Order, and it still failed. Miquella was the most brilliant of the demigods. He had resources, followers, and a genuine vision for something better. But he was cursed. His sister was cursed. And no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't escape the systems that oppressed them. The outer gods wouldn't allow it. Mohg's kidnapping of Miquella is the final nail in the coffin. Miquella was vulnerable while in the cocoon, and Mohg exploited that vulnerability. He took Miquella to the Mohgwyn Palace and tried to use him to ascend to godhood. The plan didn't work because Miquella was already too drained. But it didn't matter. The Halig tree's purpose died the moment Miquella was taken. The Albinaurics, who made the pilgrimage, are some of the saddest NPCs in the game. They're artificial life forms created through some ancient process. The Golden Order considers them abominations. They age rapidly and their legs give out, forcing them to crawl. They sought refuge at the Halig tree because Miquella promised to accept them. But when you arrive, you find them dying or dead, their pilgrimage wasted. Latenna is an Albinauric NPC whose questline involves reaching the Halig tree. She wants to deliver a medallion to the tree as her final act. When you bring her to the tree, she sits beneath it and waits. She's achieved her goal, but there's no reward. The tree is rotting. Miquella is gone. Her journey was for nothing, but she seems at peace anyway. She made it. That's enough. The Halig tree's failure is thematically important because it shows that good intentions aren't enough. Miquella wanted to help people. He had the intelligence and power to make a real difference. But the world is hostile to change. The curses, the outer gods, the war between demigods, all of it conspired to destroy his dream before it could fully form. This makes the endings more meaningful. If Miquella couldn't create an alternative to the Golden Order, what makes you think you can? The game is telling you that changing the world is incredibly difficult, and maybe, but you're still given the choice to try. That's the core of the tragedy. Trying and failing is built into the structure of the world, but trying anyway is the only option that has any meaning. Saint Trina and Miquella's other half. Saint Trina is a mysterious figure mentioned in item descriptions and NPC dialogue. She's associated with sleep and purple flames. Her lilies can induce sleep. Her arrows put enemies into slumber. There are churches dedicated to her. Some NPCs worship her, but her identity is one of the game's deepest mysteries. The prevailing theory, supported by various item descriptions, is that Saint Trina is Miquella's other half, similar to how Radagon is Marika's other half. Miquella and Saint Trina might be the same being expressing different aspects. Miquella is the brilliant Empyrean working to cure curses and build the Halig tree. Saint Trina is the saintly figure who offers mercy through sleep. Sleep in Elden Ring is portrayed as a gentle escape from suffering. Saint Trina's lilies are described as providing peaceful slumber. The sleep status effect in game mechanics isn't violent, it's just rest. This contrasts with every other status effect, which involves pain or corruption. Sleep is the one merciful status in a game full of suffering. If Saint Trina is Miquella's way of offering mercy to those he can't save, it makes sense. Miquella couldn't cure every curse. He couldn't save everyone rejected by the Golden Order, but he could offer them sleep, a temporary escape from pain. Saint Trina is compassion expressed through giving people rest when nothing else can be done. The churches of Saint Trina are small and humble compared to the Golden Order's grand structures. They're scattered in out-of-the-way places. The people who worship Saint Trina are desperate people seeking relief from pain. They're not looking for power or glory, they just want to sleep and forget their suffering for a while. Some item descriptions mention that Saint Trina's followers would fall into sleep and never wake up. This could be read as tragic, people dying in their sleep, or it could be read as merciful. If your life is endless suffering and sleep is the only escape, maybe never waking up is a blessing. The game leaves this ambiguous. The connection between sleep and death is ancient in mythology. Sleep is the little death, the temporary cessation of consciousness. If Miquella is connected to both sleep through Saint Trina and to attempts to control fate through the Halig tree, then he's playing with the boundary between existence and non-existence in multiple ways. The purple flame associated with Saint Trina is different from any other flame in the game. It's not the golden flame of the Erd tree, not the red flame of the giants, not the yellow flame of frenzy, not the black flame of destined death. It's its own thing. Purple suggests a mixture, maybe of life and death, consciousness and unconsciousness, being and not being. There's a sword called the Sword of Saint Trina that you can find in the game. It's not a powerful weapon, but it can inflict sleep. The description talks about Saint Trina's love and how she embraces all who suffer. This language is very different from how Miquella is described. Miquella is brilliant and determined. Saint Trina is loving and accepting. They're complementary aspects. If Miquella and Saint Trina are the same person split into two identities, it parallels Marika and Radagon, but in a different way. Marika and Radagon have opposed goals. Marika wants to rebel. Radagon wants to preserve. But Miquella and Saint Trina seem to have aligned goals. Both want to help those who suffer. They just use different methods. Miquella works to cure and change. Saint Trina offers rest and acceptance. The lack of Saint Trina content in the base game is conspicuous. She's mentioned enough to be significant, but you never meet her or see her or interact with her directly. She's purely background lore. This suggests that her story might be told in DLC, or might be intentionally left as a mystery for players to speculate about. Some players think Saint Trina is dead or was destroyed when Miquella embedded himself in the Halig tree. If they were two aspects of one being, maybe Miquella had to sacrifice Saint Trina to attempt his transformation. This would add another layer of tragedy. To try to save everyone, he had to destroy the part of himself that offered mercy to those he couldn't save. The sleep mechanic in the game is underused compared to other status effects, which supports the idea that Saint Trina's role was reduced or cut from the final game. There are sleep items and weapons, but not many enemies are vulnerable to sleep, and the status doesn't have the impact that poison or rot or frostbite have. Saint Trina's influence is muted, but even in her limited presence, Saint Trina represents something important thematically. She's the acknowledgement that not everyone can be saved. Not every problem has a solution. Sometimes the best you can offer is temporary relief. Sleep isn't a cure, but it's a kindness. For people trapped in hopeless situations, even temporary escape has value. If Miquella's unalloyed gold represents the attempt to fix things through mastery and craft, Saint Trina's sleep represents the acceptance that some things can't be fixed. Both approaches have merit. Both are needed. A world with only solutions and no acceptance would be as cruel as a world with only acceptance and no solutions. The purple lilies that grow in places associated with Saint Trina are beautiful, but also slightly sinister. They offer sleep, which sounds peaceful, but sleep can be death, The line between mercy and giving up is thin. Saint Trina walks that line. She offers rest to the suffering, but is that rest, or is it surrender? The game doesn't answer this question, which is appropriate. Mercy is complicated, knowing when to fight and when to rest, when to cure and when to accept. Those are judgment calls that depend on circumstances. Saint Trina embodies the difficult truth that sometimes love means letting people sleep, rather than forcing them to keep struggling. Farum Azula and time. Farum Azula is a crumbling city floating in a storm outside the normal flow of time. It's where you fight Malikith, and where the Dragon Lord Placidusax waits for a god that will never return. The architecture is ancient, predating the Golden Order. The place feels like a memory or a dream given physical form. Time in Farum Azula doesn't work normally. Past and future seem to overlap. When you kill Maliketh and claim the Rune of Death, you're transported back to Leyndell. But Leyndell has changed. It's covered in ash. The sky is red. The Erd Tree is burning. This suggests that what happens in Farum Azula affects the past or the present in ways that defy normal causality. The beastmen who inhabit Farum Azula are servants of the ancient dragons. They wield massive weapons and protect the ruins, even though the civilization that built this place is long gone. They're like Maliketh in a way, guardians of something that no longer exists, performing duties that no longer have meaning. The dragons in Farum Azula are some of the most dangerous enemies in the game. They use ancient dragon lightning, which is more powerful than normal lightning. They're not degraded drakes. They're true ancient dragons with stone scales and mastery of the storm. Fighting them feels like confronting a power from an earlier age of the world. Placidusax is hidden in a secret area accessible only by lying down in a specific location. When you find him, he's sleeping in the center of a storm, waiting. He was the Elden Lord before the age of the Erd Tree. His god disappeared or fled, and he's been waiting for its return ever since. How long has he been waiting? The game suggests it's been thousands of years. The fight with Placidusax is spectacular. He teleports using lightning, disappearing into clouds and reappearing to strike. He has 5 heads in the lore, but only 2 remain by the time you fight him. The other 3 were destroyed in some ancient conflict. He's a broken remnant of a previous age, fighting to defend a position that no longer matters. When you kill Placidusax, you get his remembrance, which can be traded for his weapons or incantations. These tools use ancient dragon lightning and have descriptions that talk about the age before the Erd Tree. They're relics of a forgotten era, powerful but obsolete. The world has moved on from the age of dragons, but the dragons haven't moved on from themselves. Farum Azula's physical impossibility, floating in a storm with pieces of buildings suspended in mid-air, suggests that it exists in a state of temporal collapse. The city is falling apart, but the falling is frozen. It's been collapsing for eternity without ever finishing the collapse. This mirrors the dragons' situation. They're in decline, but the decline never completes. They're stuck in the process of ending. The storm surrounding Farum Azula is not natural weather. It's described as a manifestation of the dragon's power, or possibly the remnant of the god that Placidusax served. The storm keeps the city suspended outside time, preserved in stasis. When you arrive, you're entering a bubble where past and present coexist. This temporal instability explains why defeating Maliketh affects Leyndell in the present. The Rune of Death being released doesn't just happen in Farum Azula's isolated timeline, it ripples through all timelines simultaneously. Death is restored to the world retroactively, which means the rules changed and the past adjusts to accommodate the new rules. This is cosmically terrifying if you think about it. The fundamental laws of reality can be rewritten, and when they are, history itself shifts. What was true becomes false, what was impossible becomes inevitable. The people living in these timelines don't notice the changes, because from their perspective, it was always this way. Farum Azula is also where you find the smithing stones that allow you to upgrade weapons to maximum level. These ancient dragon smithing stones are remnants of the dragon's craft. The dragons knew how to work stone and lightning into weapons of perfect quality. This knowledge is what allows you to create god-slaying weapons. The connection between Farum Azula and Leyndell is architectural. The ruins floating around Farum Azula include pieces that look like they're from Leyndell, Either Leyndell was partially built from Farum Azula's ruins, or Farum Azula is the future of Leyndell, existing simultaneously in the past. Time is so broken in this place that causality loops back on itself. There's a grace site in Farum Azula called Beside the Great Bridge, and from there you can see the massive dragon corpse that forms part of the architecture. Dragons so large that their bodies become landscape features. This is the scale of power that existed before the Golden Order. The Erd Tree is impressive, but the dragons built cities from their own remains. The silence in Farum Azula is oppressive. There are no friendly NPCs, no merchants, no questlines that bring you here except as a mandatory stop on the path to becoming Elden Lord. It's a dead place, preserved in time, waiting for no one except the Dragon Lord, who's waiting for a god, who's never coming back. When you rest at grace sites in Farum Azula, Melina doesn't appear with dialogue the way she does in other regions. This place is outside her knowledge, or outside her ability to reach. You're truly alone here, confronting powers from before her time, before Marika's time, before the Golden Order existed. The Godskin duo fight in Farum Azula is one of the most frustrating boss fights in the game, not because of lore, but because you're fighting two enemies simultaneously. But lore-wise, it's significant. The Godskins served the Glowmide Queen who wielded destined death before Malekith defeated her. Finding Godskins in Farum Azula suggests they have a connection to this place, possibly to the Age of Dragons or to the rune that Malekith guards. The Godskins wear the skin of gods they've killed, which means at some point they were killing gods plural. Not just threatening them, actually killing them and wearing their skin as armor. This implies that before Malekith locked away destined death, gods were vulnerable and could be hunted. The Godskin apostles were god hunters, predators of divine beings. Malekith defeating the Glowmide Queen and sealing destined death ended the age when gods could be killed. This established Marika's supremacy. She couldn't be killed if death itself was locked away. Her reign was secured not through strength alone, but through removing the mechanism by which she could be defeated. But Farum Azula exists outside the timeline where that happened. Here, in this bubble of frozen time, the old rules still partially apply. The Godskins are still hunting. Malekith is still guarding. Placidusax is still waiting. Nothing has resolved. Everything is suspended in the moment before endings. When you finish in Farum Azula and return to Leyndell, you're re-entering the timeline with new rules. Death is restored. The Erd Tree is burning. The end game has begun. Farum Azula was the threshold between the broken world and the world that can be reshaped. You had to go outside time to get the power to change time. The whole place is a meditation on decay and persistence. Everything in Farum Azula is falling apart, but it's been falling apart for so long that the falling has become a stable state. The dragons persist in their decline. The stones persist in their crumbling. The storm persists in its raging. Nothing ends because ending requires time to flow, and time here is broken. This makes Farum Azula the perfect place to claim the rune of death. Death is the ultimate ending, the force that makes time matter. By taking the rune out of this timeless place and bringing it back to the world, you're restoring consequence. Things can end again. That's both terrible and necessary. The Shattering War. The Shattering War is the conflict that consumed the lands between after Marika shattered the Elden Ring. Each demigod claimed a great rune and tried to gather enough power to repair the ring and become Elden Lord. The war lasted for years, possibly centuries, and destroyed much of the world. The strange thing about the Shattering War is that it never really ended. It just petered out into stalemate. None of the demigods could defeat all the others. Radahn and Malenia fought to a draw. Rykard fed himself to a serpent and withdrew from the conflict. Ranni killed herself and disappeared. Mog kidnapped Mikella and built his own underground dynasty. Godric hid in his castle. Morgott defended Leyndell. Nobody won. The war just stopped without resolution. This stalemate is why the Tarnished were called back. The demigods couldn't settle things on their own. They were too evenly matched or too broken to continue. So Marika, or Grace, or whoever controls these things, brought back the Tarnished as wildcards. You're not part of the established power structure. You don't have centuries of alliances and betrayals complicating your path. You just fight your way through, and take what you need. The war's impact on the common people is rarely discussed by the demigods, but visible everywhere. The lands between are full of soldiers who died in battles they didn't understand. Castles are ruins, trade routes are destroyed. Entire regions like Caelid are uninhabitable. The demigods were fighting over who gets to rule, but they destroyed the thing they were fighting for. There's a parallel to real-world conflicts, where the aristocracy fights wars that devastate the peasantry. The demigods are gods and heroes, with great runes and legendary power, but the soldiers who died for them were just people. Godric's soldiers were forcibly grafted. Radahn's soldiers infected themselves with rot, out of loyalty. Malenia's knights chose to rot with her. Every demigod commanded incredible devotion and used it to get their followers killed. The question of what the demigods were actually fighting for becomes murky when you examine it. They all wanted to become Elden Lord, but what does that mean? Repair the Elden Ring and rule the lands between under the Golden Order? Why? The Order is already broken. Marika herself shattered it. What are they restoring? Maybe each demigod had their own vision for what the Elden Ring should be once repaired. Morgott wanted to restore the Golden Order as it was. Rykard wanted to devour the gods and create something new. Malenia was fighting for Miquella's dream of a gentler order. Mog wanted to create a blood dynasty. They weren't fighting for the same thing. They were fighting to impose competing visions on reality. But the war also revealed the limits of divine power. The demigods are called gods, but they can hurt each other. They can fight to stalemates. They can go mad, be defeated, die. Their divinity doesn't make them invincible. It just makes their conflicts more destructive. When gods go to war, the collateral damage is catastrophic. The Tarnished entering this war changes the dynamics. You're not a god. You don't have a great rune at the start, but you have something the demigods don't have: the ability to actually die and come back stronger. Every defeat teaches you. Every death is temporary. You have infinite attempts, which means eventually you'll win through pure persistence. This is why the Tarnished succeed where the demigods failed. The demigods had too much to lose. They were protecting their territories, their followers, their pride. You have nothing to lose. You're an exile who was called back to fight. If you die, you respawn and try again. You're not defending anything, you're just taking. The war also shows the problem with immortal beings having conflicts. Normal humans go to war, people die, eventually one side wins or both sides negotiate peace. But when the combatants can't permanently die, wars don't end. They just pause. Radahn went mad, but didn't die. Rykard became a serpent, but didn't die. Malenia fell into a coma, but didn't die. The war stopped, not because anyone won, but because everyone got stuck. Introducing permadeath through the Rune of Death changes this. Once you defeat Malekith, the demigods can be killed for real. This is why the endgame progresses so quickly. You kill Godfrey, you kill Radagon, you kill the Elden Beast. They don't come back. Death makes victory possible. The Shattering War is also a story about family destroying itself. Most of the demigods are related. Radahn, Ranni, and Rykard are siblings. Morgott and Mohg are brothers. Malenia and Miquella are twins. They're all Marika's children or descendants. This is a family civil war, where siblings and half-siblings are killing each other over their mother's shattered legacy. Marika's role in starting the war raises questions about her motives. Did she want her children to fight? Did she think one of them would prove worthy to rebuild the ring? Or did she shatter it specifically, to break the cycle and free the world from the Golden Order? And the war was an unintended consequence. Some item descriptions suggest Marika told her children to struggle, to grow strong through adversity. If that's her philosophy, then the war is exactly what she wanted. She broke the ring to force her children into conflict, believing that whoever survived and claimed enough power to repair it would be worthy to rule. It's a brutal form of natural selection applied to gods. But this interpretation makes Marika a monster. She condemned the entire world to war and suffering to test her children. Millions died. Regions were destroyed. The lands between were devastated. Also, her kids could compete for the right to rule. That's not motherly love. That's cosmic cruelty. Alternatively, maybe Marika shattered the ring hoping that none of her children would be able to repair it. Maybe she wanted the order to stay broken, forcing everyone to move on and find new ways to live. But the demigods refused to move on. They clung to the old system and fought to restore it. Her rebellion failed because her children didn't understand what she was trying to do. The war ending in stalemate suggests that no one was worthy. No demigod had the strength or vision to win decisively. They all failed Marika's test, if it was a test, or they all succeeded in preventing each other from restoring the order she hated. Either way, the war accomplished nothing except destruction. Enter the Tarnished. You're not her child, you're not part of the dynasty. You're an outsider she called back for reasons that are never fully explained. Maybe you're her backup plan. Maybe you're the one she trusted to actually make a choice about the ring's future, rather than just fighting to restore the past. When you defeat the demigods and claim their great runes, you're ending the war by force. You're not negotiating, you're not forming alliances, you're just killing everyone who stands between you and the Erd Tree. It's brutal and direct, which is maybe what was needed. The demigods were deadlocked in complex political and personal conflicts. You cut through all of that by refusing to engage with it. The Shattering War is the backdrop for everything in Elden Ring, but it's also kind of over by the time you arrive. You're not fighting in the war, you're scavenging its aftermath. The demigods are already defeated, or mad, or hidden. You're just collecting the pieces they couldn't or wouldn't use. This makes your journey feel less like heroism and more like grave robbing. You're walking through the ruins of other people's conflicts, taking their power and using it to impose your own ending on their world. They fought and suffered and failed, and you benefit from their failure. That's dark, but it's also honest about what power is and where it comes from. The war also left behind all the soldiers who can't stop fighting. The knights and warriors scattered across the lands between are still loyal to dead or absent masters. They attack you on sight because that's what they've been doing for years. The war is over, but nobody told them. They're trapped in a cycle of violence that outlasted its original purpose. This is another example of how the game portrays loyalty as both admirable and tragic. These soldiers are dedicated to their lords, but their lords have failed them. They're defending territories that don't matter anymore, serving causes that are lost. Their loyalty has become meaningless repetition, but they can't or won't stop. You're the force that ends the cycle. When you kill these soldiers, you're releasing them from their duties. When you defeat the demigods, you're finalizing the war's outcome. The Shattering War needed an outside force to impose an ending because the participants were incapable of ending it themselves. You're that force. You're the period at the end of a sentence that's been running on for centuries. Alexander and the Warrior Jars. Alexander is one of the most beloved NPCs in Elden Ring, despite being a pot filled with warrior corpses. He's a warrior jar, which are living pots that absorb dead warriors to gain their strength. The lore behind warrior jars is disturbing. They're containers filled with rotting flesh and guts, animated by some unknown magic, and they exist to fight and die. But Alexander has personality. He's cheerful, optimistic, and dreams of becoming the greatest warrior jar in history. You meet him stuck in the ground in Limgrave, and if you help him, he thanks you and sets off on his journey. You encounter him several more times throughout the game, each time in a new location, pursuing his dream of testing himself against the strongest warriors. His questline culminates in Farum Azula, where he challenges you to a duel. He wants to fight you because you've become the strongest warrior in the lands between, and he wants to absorb your strength. The fight is surprisingly tough. Alexander hits hard and has a lot of health. He's serious about this dream. When you defeat him, he's happy. He thanks you for the duel and says he's going to return to the earth and become nourishment for other warriors. Then he asks you to take his insides, the warrior remains he's been carrying, and use them.